Chapter 640. At that moment, Zhou felt that the techniques he had been practicing recently were mainly movement technique. Now that he couldn't move, he lacked the means to counter his enemies. There's still too little time. I don't have the time to learn so many skills. Zhou's time was indeed limited. Others only needed to advance one life soul, but he needed to advance 4. Furthermore, he had only practiced for a little more than a year. To be able to train his movement technique to the pinnacle was a rather terrifying progress. However, at this juncture, the calamities didn't care if Zhou had the time to practice. The white flames were about to spray at Zhou. Zhou didn't use the bamboo blade to slash again. Instead, he used the demonic astral wheel's suction technique and struck out with his palm. Using the spinning force, he diverted the white flames to the side. Even so, the demonic astral wheel's rotation gradually slowed down in the white flames. A few seconds later, the spinning force was no longer enough to divert the white flames. All Zhou could do was strike out again. Zhou sheathed the bamboo blade and constantly struck out the demonic astral wheel with both hands, diverting the white flames that spewed at him to the side. Hence, a magical scene happened. The monster spewed out flames that resembled white fire snakes, but they were diverted to the side by Zhou's demonic astral wheel. They bloomed like flaming chrysanthemums that filled the sky. "Junior brother, lower your head." At that moment, he suddenly heard Lu Yun's roar. Without any hesitation, Zhou crouched down and lowered his head. A cold beam that resembled a needle flew over Zhou's head. The monster's attention was attracted by Zhou. Its gaze followed his head down, and it wasn't prepared for the cold beam. The cold beam flashed and nailed into its eye. The monster immediately let out a tragic cry. Zhou took the opportunity to draw his saber and slash. The demonic astral wheel spun and slashed, beheading the screaming monster. On careful look, the monster's eye was pierced by the orchid blade. "Thanks." Zhou extended his hand and sucked the orchid blade back, before throwing it to Lu Yun again. "If you die, I won't live long either. 2 people are better than 1. I'm doing this for myself. As for you, you expended so much essence energy just now. It's best you recover your essence energy before continuing," Lu Yun said. Although Zhou didn't really need Lu Yun's help, since Lu Yun had expressed his goodwill and was willing to work together to face the problem, it would definitely help them escape Netherworld City. "If you don't have any essence energy crystals, I can sell them to you. 10 epic essence energy crystals in exchange for your movement technique. How about that?" Lu Yun also had some thoughts about Zhou's movement technique. His own movement technique was already fast enough. There weren't many people at the same level who could catch up to him, but Zhou's movement technique was even faster than his. He also wanted to know how Zhou had mastered his movement technique. "Don't you think 10 crystals is too little?" Zhou said with a smile. "You have to know that we are in a perilous situation now. No one knows when we can get out, nor do we know how many battles we will have to experience. Now, a primordial energy crystal is worth 10 or even 100 times more than usual. It's very likely that a primordial energy crystal can save your life later on. If you can use one more skill, you might survive. Do you still think it's expensive?" Lu Yun said seriously. "It's still expensive. Even if it's 100 times more essence energy crystals, do you think it can be exchanged for a mythical movement technique?" Zhou asked. "What? Your movement technique is at the mythical stage?" Lu Yun was alarmed. "It's real. If you really want to know my plan, it's best you show some sincerity and help me get Star Stealer," Zhou said. "Does your plan need to use mythical skill crystals?" Lu Yun asked. "There's no need. All my skills are at the epic and legendary stage. There's no need for mythical skill crystals," Zhou answered. "You comprehended a divine skill yourself?" Lu Yun was even more alarmed. Lu Yun could understand Zhou's mythical companion beasts as being rich. Perhaps he had huge resources and factions supporting him. However, comprehending a divine skill wasn't something that could be completed with resources. Although resources were one of the most important conditions, what really played a decisive role was a person's perception. Teachers' eyes are really sharp. A random student he took in has such a standard. Unfortunately, your divine skill movement technique is useless in such a place, Lu Yun said with a sigh. Let's continue walking. We don't know how a day is counted in Netherworld City. Perhaps we don't have as much time as we imagine, Zhou said as he continued walking forward. Lu Yun quickly chased after him, clearly wanting to cooperate with Zhou. After taking a few steps, Lu Yun also encountered a dimensional creature. The dimensional creature they encountered this time was the saber executioner they had previously seen. The cause of death was naturally a saber strike. Lu Yun had seen Zhou kill the saber executioner, so he already had some understanding of it. He didn't spend too much effort to kill it. The two of them walked forward together. The most common dimensional creatures they encountered were the saber executioner, the flaming evil ghost, the startling flash spirit flying saber, and the drowning water demon. They were all epic dimensional creatures with their own characteristics. However, with Zhou and Lu Yun's cooperation, they killed them one by one and successfully walked past. With every step the two of them took, Lu Yun would shout at the people on the other side, hoping to see if they could hear him. Zhou naturally knew that it was useless. Unless they walked within 10 stone slabs, the other party definitely wouldn't be able to hear them. Zhou did the math. They needed 153 steps to reach a distance of 10 stone slabs from the person. There were only slightly more than 200 steps left. This was only enough for them to speak to the other party. It was unknown how many more steps they would need to take to leave Netherworld City. The two of them took 120 steps and saw that the person closest to them was already very close. Just as they were about to continue forward, they suddenly heard a bell ring. Gong. The sudden ringing of a bell startled both of them. The ringing came from the top of the building at the end of the stone step. There was a brass bell hanging on top of the building, and it was emitting a heart-wrenching sound. Gong. 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 The bell kept ringing. Zhou had never heard such a strange bell sound before. He had a nagging feeling that it was inauspicious. What crappy bell is this? Why does it sound like a death knell? Lu Yun blurted out. Death knell. Zhou was taken aback. After Lu Yun said that, he thought about it carefully and was stunned as well. The two of them looked at each other and saw the uneasiness in each other's eyes. After the bell rang 7 times, it finally stopped. In front of the building, a throne carved from yellow jade slowly rose. There was a person sitting on the throne. Chapter 641. The person wore armor carved from white bones and had a skull-like mask on his head. His eyes shimmered with a strange red light as he casually sat on the topaz throne and sized up the people on the long street below. His gaze didn't look like he was looking at a human, but like he was looking at a pig or dog. He supported his cheek with one hand and tilted his head as he looked at them. As for the people on the long street below, their faces were pale as their bodies involuntarily trembled, as though something extremely terrifying was about to happen. Who is that fellow? Why is he so cocky? Lu Yun whispered. The person on the stone steps seemed to hear Lu Yun's words as he glanced at him from afar. Immediately, Lu Yun's scalp tingled as cold sweat broke out on his back. Thankfully, the person only glanced at him and didn't pay him much attention. Zhou noticed that there was a bowl made of skulls in front of the person. Unfortunately, he didn't know what was inside the bowl. Truth Listener's abilities were limited to a portion, so it couldn't reach that far. Just as Zhou was pondering over it, the person extended a hand and took something out of the bowl, clamping it between his fingers. Only then did Zhou see that it was a die. There were a total of 6 of them. Each of them was crystalline like jade, but they looked more like they were carved from the bones of some creature. The die didn't look too special. Just like an ordinary die, The 6 faces were engraved with numbers from 1 to 6. They were all red, like the color of blood. When the person picked up the die, Zhou Wen and Lu Yun were alarmed because the stone slabs beneath their feet lit up. However, this time, the stone slabs lit up in a very special way. Blood-colored numbers appeared on them. The number under Zhou Wen's feet was 19, and the number under Lu Yun's feet was 18. They didn't know what this number represented. However, Zhou Wen soon knew what the numbers meant. This was because the feet of the people in front of them also lit up with blood-colored numbers. Everyone's numbers were different, from 1 to 33. This also meant that there were a total of 33 people on this long street. These numbers were their numbers. Zhou Wen had already figured out what would happen next. The high and mighty guy would definitely throw the dice. If the number he threw was the same as the number under someone's feet, then that person would definitely be out of luck. Just by looking at the reactions of the people in front of him, he knew that they must have experienced the same thing, which was why they were so afraid. If the number under our feet is the same as the number he threw, I wonder what will happen. Lu Chu also noticed the clues, and he gulped as he spoke. I don't know, but I'm sure it's nothing good. As Zhou Wen spoke, the man waved his hand and threw the die out. Zhou Wen originally imagined that he would throw the dice into the bowl, but the outcome surprised them. The person actually threw the dice down. The 6 dice landed on the stone steps and rolled down the step. The amazing thing was that when the 6 dice rolled down, they became bigger and bigger. When they landed on the long street, each side was more than a meter long. The 6 huge rolling dice rushed into the long street at an extremely fast speed. Wherever they passed, the people in front of them would dodge to the side, not daring to come into contact with the dice. They seemed to be extremely afraid. What should we do? Lu Chu looked at the dice that rolled over. 2 of them were huge, and they would likely pass by where they were standing. If they wanted to dodge, they had to move at least 3 stone slabs away. Let's dodge first. Zhou Wen didn't know what the dice were, but he decided to avoid them for now. He would wait until he got to the front and figure things out. When the dice rolled over, the 2 of them chose to dodge. The 6 dice rolled past them with a rumbling sound, and the number of steps they took was reduced by 4. Clang! The dice rolled all the way to the door and hit it before rebounding and landing in the empty space inside the door. After spinning for a while, they stopped. 1, 2, 3 threes, plus a 6 and a 5, the total number was 22. Zhou Wen and Lu Chu immediately looked at the person with the red number 22 at his feet on the street in front of them. The person was probably in the middle of the long street. He looked like a very muscular middle-aged man. He was tall and mighty, and his muscles looked like they were made of steel. Everyone on the long street looked at him, and his face instantly turned pale. He was extremely terrified as he shouted crazily, but unfortunately, his voice couldn't be heard. All he could see was him opening his mouth to shout, but no one knew what he was shouting. As he shouted, he ran crazily, but no matter which stone slab he ran to, the stone slab would light up with a blood-red 22. Bam! Without any warning, the middle-aged man's body exploded like a watermelon, and blood flowed all over the ground. However, soon, the blood seeped into the cracks of the stone slabs on the ground, leaving not a single drop behind. It was as though the stone slabs could absorb blood. The man on the throne opened his fingers slightly and the 6 huge dice flew back into the air. They slowly shrank in midair, and when they returned to his hand, they had returned to their normal size. With the dice in his hand, the man looked coldly at the people on the long street. The throne slowly descended and finally vanished. That bastard, what does he think we are? His toy? Lu Yun said through gritted teeth. From the looks of it, that's right. Zhou Wen stared at the building on the stone step. There was no longer a throne or man. After watching for a while, Zhou Wen said, from the looks of it, that fellow should be the most terrifying dimensional creature in Netherworld City. If we can kill him, perhaps we will have a chance of leaving. How do we kill him? The rules of Netherworld City are set by him. We are just chess pieces on a chessboard here. How can we play with the chess player? Lu Yun said with a bitter expression. That depends on whether he abides by the rules. If he abides by the rules, even if he's a chess player, we still have a chance of defeating him, Zhou said. What if he doesn't abide by the rules? Lu Yun asked. Then think of another way to not abide by the rules. Zhou looked at the person closest to them. There was still a look of horror on his face. From the looks of it, he had been frightened by the scene just now. Let's go. Let's go and ask them what's going on here, Zhou said as he continued walking forward. They weren't far from the person to begin with. After killing a few epic dimensional creatures, they finally arrived within 10 steps of the person. Chapter 642. The person's hair was already white, and he looked to be in his 50s or 60s. He was thin, and although there were many wrinkles on his face, his edges were still there. It was obvious that he was a handsome man when he was young. When the old man was looking at the dice, he saw Zhou and Lu Yun. He also knew that they had walked over, but he didn't seem to have the intention to communicate with them. All he did was stand there dejectedly. "Brother, how should I address you?" Lu Yun asked. When the old man heard the voice, he seemed to snap to his senses as he subconsciously answered, "My name is Chu He. I'm a professor at Imperial Capital University's History Department." "Peasant? Is your wife called Dangwu?" Lu Yun joked. "It's not peasant. It's Chu He from the Han world." The old man didn't have a sense of humor. Or rather, in such an environment, there was nothing that could amuse him. Therefore, the old man only explained in all seriousness. When Zhou heard the old man's words, his eyes widened as he asked in disbelief, "Chu He? How many professors are there named Chu He in Imperial Capital College's History Department?" "Only me." Chu He seemed to be numb. He didn't care why Zhou would ask such a strange question. Zhou looked at Chu He excitedly. In the entire Imperial Capital College, Zhou only knew one professor's name, Chu He. The reason why Zhou could remember this name wasn't because Chu He was famous. No matter how famous Chu He was in his field, Zhou wouldn't care or remember his name. However, Chu He was different. This was because he was a professor at Imperial Capital College's History Department. He was a member of the former principal's expedition team. Zhou had seen Chu He's name and information on the list. He had also seen the expedition team's photo. However, Zhou had only taken a brief look back then. Chu He wasn't his target, so he didn't pay much attention to him. Now that he thought about it, this Chu He was indeed somewhat similar to the Chu He in the photo. However, the Chu He in the photo was fatter and not that thin. His condition was also better. His face was ruddy, and his hair was still black, not as white as it was now. Back then, Chu He was in high spirits. Is this really Professor Chu He from the expedition team? Shouldn't he have entered the Zhuolu battlefield with the former principal and company? They disappeared together, so how could they be here? Zhou was already certain that the former principal had perished, but a person who should have perished with the former principal had actually appeared in Netherworld City. This left Zhou's heart in turmoil. Could it be that Yellow Spring City is really the resting place for humans after they die? Could it be that the people in this city were not living people, but ghosts that had already died? Then what about me and Lu Yun? Could it be that we're already dead without even knowing it? Our souls have entered Netherworld City? Zhou shook his head and threw this absurd thought out of his mind. "Professor Chu, have you ever been to the Zhuolu battlefield for research?" Zhou asked as he stared at Chu He. He hoped that Chu He was the expedition team's Professor Chu He. If they were really the same person, since Professor Chu He was still alive, it was very likely that the former principal hadn't perished. After all, the former principal's corpse hadn't been found in Zhuolu, nor had he found any other relics. Ever since he was young, there weren't many people who had treated Chu He well. The former principal was one of them. Zhou felt that a good person like the former principal shouldn't have died so early. At the very least, he didn't wish for the former principal to die so early. No. He shook his head. How can that be? Think about it carefully. The League invited you to join the expedition team that headed to Zhuolu. You, Professor Ouyang Ting, and a few other experts and professors went to Zhuolu together, Zhou said. After speaking for a while, Chu He's mind seemed to become a lot more active. After hearing Zhou Wen's words, he lowered his head and thought for a while before saying, I remember now. Back then, an organization under the League did invite me to Zhuolu to do research. I remember that Professor Ouyang Ting was on the list back then. You went to Zhuolu with them. Why are you here alone? Zhou asked excitedly. He had already looked at the others on the long street, but he didn't see the former principal or the other members of the expedition team. To his surprise, he shook his head and said, No. I didn't go to Zhuolu. Back then, I made a major discovery and wanted to go to the Taklamakan Desert to do research. Therefore, I rejected the invitation and didn't go to Zhuolu. You rejected the invitation? Zhou looked at Chu He with a look of disbelief. He had seen the information on the Zhuolu expedition team. Although there was no more information after their disappearance, the records were still very detailed before that. There were even records of them clocking in when they were at the encampment. Many people in the encampment had seen Professor Chu He, and some had chatted with him. Now, Chu He actually said that he had never been to Zhuolu and had rejected the invitation from the beginning. This made many thoughts flash through Zhou Wen's mind. Is this Chu He lying? Or did he really not go to Zhuolu? If he really didn't go to Zhuolu, then who is the Chu He in Zhuolu? Is this Chu He fake, or is the Chu He of the expedition team fake? Or is it the same person? After Chu He died, his soul entered Netherworld City and he has forgotten the past? That's not right either. He still remembers his name and knows that he's a professor at Imperial Capital College. It doesn't look like his memories have been washed away. Zhou Wen's mind was in chaos as he couldn't figure it out. Yes, I rejected it, Chu He said bitterly. Back then, I also hesitated. If I had chosen to go to Zhuolu, I wouldn't have been trapped in this hell-like place. Zhou thought to himself, if you had gone to Zhuolu back then, your outcome might not have been better than now. At least you are still alive. I can't even be sure if the former principal and the rest are dead or not. Junior brother, let's talk about those trivial matters later. We don't have much time left. Get to the point, Lu Yun said anxiously. Zhou nodded and asked, Professor Chu, how did you enter Netherworld City? What's going on here? Chu He said, back then, I was studying the ruins of the Naya civilization in the desert. Who knew that I would encounter a huge sandstorm? After the sandstorm passed, I saw Netherworld City. Then, the surroundings burned, forcing me to flee into Netherworld City. Chu He's experience in Netherworld City was similar to Zhou Wen's. However, Zhou Wen thought of a very important problem. Chapter 643. Professor Chu, when did you enter Netherworld City? Zhou Wen asked directly. If this Chu He was really Professor Chu He from the Imperial Capital College, then the Professor Chu He who went to Zhuolu was very likely an imposter. However, the imposter hadn't been discovered for so long. This meant that Professor Chu He had come to the desert very early, so no one had seen him again. Otherwise, the imposter would have been discovered long ago. In this case, Professor Chu He should have entered Netherworld City very early. Otherwise, he would definitely have contacted the outside world. Someone in the outside world should know that he was in the desert and not Zhuolu. However, the truth was that no one knew of this situation. Even Chu He's family thought that he was in Zhuolu. This was very amiss. If someone hadn't deliberately cut off Professor Chu He's connection with the outside world, it meant that he had entered Netherworld City very early, so no one knew that he was here. However, with the 3 ironclad laws of Netherworld City, How did Professor Chu he survive? What time? Professor Chu he looked at him strangely and said, "It's today. Didn't you come in today because of the sandstorm?" Today? Then didn't you contact your family before you came in? Zhou asked in disbelief. There's no signal in the desert. How can I contact my family? About half a month ago, I went to a city outside to contact my family one. At that time, I was very excited to tell them that I had made a major discovery and would soon return to reunite with them. I never expected. Chu He's face was filled with sorrow. Zhou was completely dumbfounded. Chu He had contacted his family half a month ago, so why hadn't his family mentioned this matter? His family hadn't mentioned Chu He's arrival in the Taklamakan at all. Now, Zhou wished he could immediately return and ask Chu He's family what was going on. From Zhou's point of view, this wasn't a coincidence. For Professor Chu He's to appear in different places, someone must be controlling everything from behind the scenes. Who is doing this? If the Zhuolu expedition team's Chu He is fake, then why did the fake Chu He sneak into the expedition team? Could the disappearance of the former principal have something to do with him? With this in mind, Zhou's mind turned active. If someone had really captured the old principal, then the old principal might still be alive. However, Lu Yun was somewhat anxious. Zhou didn't get any serious questions after asking all day. He had no choice but to ask, "Professor Chu, you came earlier than us. Do you know what's going on here? What was that dimensional creature that appeared above?" "That's City Lord Netherworld. The bronze bell above will ring every hour. It's just like the clock at home. When the bell rings 7 times a day, he will appear, throw the dice, and take away a life." Chu He said with a trembling body. "Wait, you said that the bell rings 7 times a day. In other words, you've been here for more than a day, right?" Zhou realized the problem in Chu He's words. Zhou asked. Chu He said with a bitter smile. "I heard it. Chu He 1. I Netherworld, I Chu. I Chu said, I Chu, one said. However, my worries are unnecessary. I don't even know if I can survive today, so what's the point of worrying about tomorrow?" Lu Yun was immediately disappointed. He originally imagined that he could find someone who understood the situation and ask about Netherworld City, but to his surprise, Chu He had entered Netherworld City on the same day as them. He was just a little earlier than them. He carefully looked at Chu He's feet and realized that he still had 132 steps left. He had fewer steps than Zhou and company. "Professor Chu, have you heard anything else about Netherworld City and City Lord Netherworld?" Lu Yun continued asking indignantly. To Lu Yun's surprise, Chu He knew much more than he imagined. According to the news Chu He had heard, the 3 ironclad rules of Netherworld City couldn't be violated. Otherwise, one would immediately die. Furthermore, the distance of a stone slab was a number. Be it advancing or retreating, or moving left and right repeatedly, it would be calculated. Once the number returned to 0, it meant the arrival of death. Chu He had personally seen a person self-destruct and die because the number returned to 0. It was identical to the middle-aged man who had died. It was said that there was only one way to leave Netherworld City alive. It was to walk to the end of the long street, step onto the stone steps, and arrive in front of the Netherworld Divine Throne. Only by sounding the bronze bell above could one leave Netherworld City. That's impossible. From here to the stone steps, there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 stone slabs. With our small number of steps, we can't even reach the stone steps, much less walk up the stone steps to sound the bronze bell, Lu Yun said with a frown. It's not impossible to increase the number of steps. As long as we wait for the next hour, the doors on both sides of the long street will open. When the time comes, we will have a chance to obtain steps, Chu He said as he pointed at the tightly shut buildings beside him. Do those shops sell the number of steps? What should we use to buy them? Is it money or dimensional crystals? Lu Yun asked as he sized up the shops on both sides of the street. No, those aren't shops but torture chambers. You can be tortured in the torture chambers in exchange for step. Every torture chamber has a different punishment. By suffering different punishments, you can obtain different numbers of steps. As Chu He spoke, his eyes were filled with fear. Zhou and Lu Yun were dumbfounded when they heard that. According to Chu He, there were all kinds of punishments in the torture chambers, such as burning, cutting, and so on. Having a red-hot piece of metal branded on the chest, burning one's skin and flesh could be exchanged for 5 step. There was also using a needle to stab 10 fingers in exchange for 10 step. Using a knife to scrape off a piece of flesh could give 1 step. Although the various punishments didn't take one's life, they left one shuddering in fear. In that case, as long as we can endure the pain, we can obtain enough steps to walk up the stone steps? Lu Yun asked. That's not entirely the case. Every punishment only gives a step reward on the first punishment, Chu He said. Zhou immediately counted the number of torture chambers on both sides of the street. According to the information Chu He had obtained, a torture chamber could only give about 10 step. There are 239 torture chambers. If each torture chamber can obtain 10 steps, then I can obtain more than 2,000 step. Can I reach the stone steps with so many steps? Zhou estimated inwardly. He felt that it was about right, but this was only an estimate. It might not be accurate. Junior brother, we seem to have made a mistake. Lu Yun's expression was somewhat ugly. He also thought of the same problem as Zhou. The number of steps was very tight. They probably had to go to all the torture chambers before they could ascend the Netherworld Divine Throne. However, along the way, they had already missed many torture chambers. If they were to walk back now and come back, they would waste a lot of steps, making the number of steps they already had become even fewer. Chapter 644. If we continue walking like this, I'm afraid we won't have enough steps to reach the Netherworld Divine Throne. If we go back, the number of steps will also be reduced, Lu Yun said. Zhou shook his head and said, even if we walk from the first torture chamber, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the Netherworld Divine Throne. Why? Are there still not enough steps? Lu Yun asked in puzzlement. I don't know if the number of steps is enough. I only know that in a short day, we have to suffer 239 punishments. A single punishment is indeed nothing to our bodies, but can we withstand 239 punishments cumulatively? In any case, I can't. Among the people I know, I'm afraid only one person can walk to the end of this street and survive all the punishment. Unfortunately, he isn't here, Zhou said. Although it's indeed difficult, we have to give it a try. We can't just sit back and wait for death, right? Lu Yun said. Then you can give it a try later, Zhou said as he pointed at the shop beside him. I'll give it a try. Lu Yun also knew that at this point, he had to think of all means to try. Otherwise, there was no way out. Should we walk back first? Lu Yun said as he looked at the path he had taken. However, he quickly rejected it. Let's enter the torture chamber beside us and give it a try. There was still some time before the next hour's bell rang. The two of them could only stand there and wait. Zhou took out his phone to take a look, but the download still hadn't been completed. This game was clearly relatively large. Zhou took the opportunity to cultivate God's retreat. Every time he summoned it, he would only take a few seconds. When he was about to explode, he would switch him back. After repeated cultivation, the jade infant's body became more and more transparent. Later on, it became as transparent as crystal. Zhou vaguely sensed that the jade infant was about to break through. I wonder what the life-soul of a perfect body will be like? Zhou placed all his hopes on the jade infant. God's retreat wasn't enough to resist the taboo power here. If he could advance to a perfect body, they might still have a chance of survival. As for entering the torture chamber, Zhou didn't have much hope of it. His physique was already very strong, but he might not be able to withstand so much punishment in such a short period of time. Unless Li Xian was here, Zhou didn't want to give it a try. An hour quickly passed. While the jade infant was resting, Zhou chatted with Chu He and consciously asked about Chu He's past. Chu He was already terrified after being trapped here. Being able to chat with others was also a way to relieve his psychological pressure. He spoke a lot. Chu He's memory of the past was very clear. It didn't seem like there was any problem, nor was there any amnesia. Dang. Dang. Clang, the bell rang again. This time, it rang 8 times. After the bell stopped, the doors of the torture chambers on both sides of the street opened. Zhou looked at the torture chamber beside him and saw a strange torture device inside. It looked like a wooden horse, and on its back was a long spike that resembled a unicorn's horn. However, it didn't grow on its head, but on its back. Next to the instruments of torture, there was a sign with the words "Wooden Horse Punishment in 20 Steps" written on it. Eldest senior brother, you can get 20 steps from the torture here. The reward is very high. Do you want to give it a try? Zhou said to Lu Yun. Lu Yun's face turned green when he saw the torture device. He immediately shook his head and said, "Try my ass. Let's try this. Scraping with 1,000 blade. Scrape off a piece of flesh for 1 step. A few more slices will give you a few more steps. This is a punishment that can be repeated. Perhaps there's a chance of getting more steps. Can you take it?" Zhou looked at the torture chamber and saw a metal shackle hanging from a beam. Beside it was a dagger-sized knife. He roughly understood at a glance that his hands were to be cuffed and hung up before a knife was used to scrape off his flesh. As a man, there's nothing I can't endure in order to survive. Let me do it. Lu Yun knew that he could only risk it if he wanted to live. Almost without any hesitation, Lu Yun followed Chu He's instructions and shouted at the 1,000 cuts torture chamber, "I want to receive the punishment of 1,000 cuts." Just as he said that, his body vanished from Zhou Wen's side as though he had teleported. Zhou Wen looked over and saw that his hands were cuffed as he was hung in the air of the torture chamber. The knife was picked up by a white, ghost-like creature and slashed at Lu Yun's thigh. The knife seemed to be sawing through flesh as it sliced back and forth, slicing off a piece of flesh from Lu Yun's thigh. Needless to say, the white ghost's knife skills were top-notch. The flesh that was sliced was as thin as a cicada's wing and was almost transparent. It was comparable to a top chef. Zhou roughly understood why the knife sliced so thin. It wasn't because it was afraid of death, but because if it was too thick, it wouldn't be able to cut thousands of slices. Naturally, it couldn't be considered 1,000 blades. Such a method of slicing was enough to turn Lu Yun's face pale from the pain. The wound was secondary, and not much flesh had been sliced off, but it was really painful. Lu Yun gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. The knife continued slicing, slowly slicing off another piece of flesh. When Zhou Wen looked at Lu Yun again, his forehead was already covered in cold sweat. Chu He was also horrified as he watched from the side. Such a bloody and cruel torture made one's hair stand on end. Lu Yun didn't even grunt as the knife sliced off his flesh. He was a model of a true man. Even Zhou Wen had no choice but to admire him. Lu Yun was really unyielding. To Zhou Wen's surprise, Lu Yun's wound didn't bleed much. Every time the knife sliced off a piece of flesh, the wound would automatically shrink. There wasn't a lot of bleeding. Eldest senior brother, I couldn't tell that you had cultivated such a powerful self-healing technique, Zhou Wen exclaimed. Self-healing my ass. It's the power in this torture chamber that's preventing me from bleeding. It's afraid that I'll die before I'm sliced by 1,000 blades, Lu Yun cursed. He wasn't really such a hot-tempered person. He just wanted to vent his pain through cursing. After slicing off 23 pieces in a row, the iron-blooded Lu Yun finally couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, "I give up on the torture." With a clang, the metal cuffs opened by themselves and Lu Yun's body fell. However, when he landed, he had already returned to the stone slab, he was originally on. Indeed, the number on his stone slab had increased by 23. Look, isn't this very simple? It increased by 23 in an instant. If I try a few more torture chambers, it won't be a problem for me to reach the netherworld divine throne, Lu Yun said with a pale face. Even Chu he could tell that Lu Yun was just consoling himself, much less Zhou. Sogu. Chapter 645. If we continue being tortured like this, I'm afraid we will be dead before we finish all the punishments. Zhou looked at Chu He and asked, Professor Chu, apart from torture, is there any other way to obtain steps? When we came here, we encountered some dimensional creatures. Will they leave behind anything special after they die? Chu He shook his head with certainty and said, There's no other way. Only by being tortured in the torture chamber can we obtain step. Zhou turned his head to look at the long street. Apart from them, the others had basically entered the torture chamber to be tortured. Unfortunately, he couldn't hear anything beyond 10 step. Otherwise, he would definitely be able to hear the undulating screams on the entire street. Junior brother, do you want to try the 1,000 cuts punishment? Perhaps your endurance is stronger than mine and you can take a few more steps? Lu Yun egged on from the side. He wanted to see how long Zhou could last under such torture. I think I'll pass. Zhou shook his head. He looked at the torture chambers around him and planned on choosing a less severe punishment to give it a try. Although they could directly enter the torture chamber without walking over, the range was within 10 step. If the torture chamber was more than 10 stone slabs away from them, they wouldn't be able to be tortured. Now, there were only 2 torture chambers 10 steps away from them. On the left was the 1,000 cuts punishment that Lu Yun had just been subjected to. As for the right, it was a whipping punishment. On it was written, 1 whip, 1 step. It was similar to the 1,000 cuts punishment. They were both being hung up, but one was slicing off the flesh, while the other was being whipped. Lu Yun was also looking at the whip. Seeing that it was a vine whip, he said, Then I'll try this whipping punishment. My flesh is still quite hard. I should be able to take a few more hits. With that said, Lu Yun shouted at the whipping chamber, I want to be whipped. Just like last time, Lu Yun's body vanished and he was hung in the whipping chamber. Then, a white figure that resembled a ghost appeared and picked up the vine whip. The white figure swung the whip and it unfurled. The originally smooth body of the whip was now covered with spikes that looked like thorny vines. With a crisp crack of the whip, a bloody whip mark immediately appeared on Lu Yun's body. After a few whips, Lu Yun's body was already a bloody mess. He looked even more terrifying than the 1,000 cuts from before. Lu Yun only lasted about 10 lashes before he chose to give up. After he was released, he looked a little dispirited. Motherf *Ker, this is simply not giving us a way out. How can humans endure such torture? I'll die if I'm tortured, but I'll still die if I'm not tortured. Why the hell would I be tortured? Lu Yun cursed. I'll give it a try. Zhou thought for a moment and shouted at the whipping room, I want to be whipped. Just as he finished his sentence, Zhou felt his vision blur. His body seemed to be teleported by some force, and by the time he reacted, he was already hanging in the whipping room. A white specter appeared in front of him. It had already grasped the vine whip. Junior brother, if it hurts, shout out. Don't hold it in. The more you hold it in, the more painful it will be. It will be much better if you shout out. The louder you shout, the better, said Lu Yun gloatingly. He was actually trying to find a way to relieve his mental stress. He didn't really want to see Zhou scream. All right. Zhou responded and switched his essence energy art to Tao body. God's retreat life providence also closed his eyes. However, the God's retreat life providence didn't affect the white specter. Clearly, the punishment in the torture room didn't fall under the scope of taboo powers. Seeing that God's retreat was useless, Zhou hurriedly switched to small perfection of wisdom. At the same time, he activated the Hell King life soul. Under the effects of the Hell King Life Soul, Zhou control over his body was extremely strong. Not only did his physique strengthen, but he could also remove the sense of pain. No matter how serious his injuries were, Zhou didn't feel any pain. It was as though his pain nerves had been removed. Zhou didn't plan on being tortured all the time. He just wanted to try being whipped to see how powerful the punishment was. However, just as Zhou used the Hell King Life Soul, the white specter that had already lashed out suddenly retracted its whip and didn't lash down. "Junior brother, what's going on? Don't tell me you can't even withstand a single whip and are giving up?" When Lu Yun saw this scene, he imagined that Zhou had given up. However, what happened next left Lu Yun's mouth agape. The whip-wielding white specter knelt in front of Zhou with a thud. It kowtowed to the ground and lay there trembling. Crack! The shackles that bound Zhou's hands automatically opened, allowing him to land. However, Zhou didn't give up on the punishment, so he didn't return to the street. Instead, he landed in the whipping room. His feet landed on the ground, but there were no numbers on the floor. Perhaps it was because the number of steps in the torture room wasn't counted. "Junior brother, what's going on?" Lu Yun stared at Zhou in shock and the white specter that was trembling in front of Zhou. Zhou never expected his Hell King Life Soul to have such an effect. Looking at the white specter sprawled on the ground, Zhou pondered for a moment and said to it, "Stand up." The white specter was very obedient as it stood up obediently. However, its body was still trembling as though it was extremely terrified. "Don't be afraid. Come with me," Zhou said gently to the white specter. The white specter's body trembled again as it lay on the ground again and kowtowed at Zhou. "Stand up. I told you to whip me, so do it." "This is an order," Zhou said coldly to the white specter. The white specter trembled as it got up. It held the whip in its hand, but it didn't dare whip Zhou. "Whip me if I tell you to. However, you have to whip me gently." "Just touch me," Zhou instructed the white specter. The white specter held the whip, but it still didn't dare attack. Zhou glared at it before it finally shook off the whip and lashed at Zhou's body. The whip whistled through the air, but it only touched Zhou's clothes before immediately retracting. Zhou only felt his skin touch his clothes, but he didn't feel any pain. The white specter was frightened as it prostrated on the ground and kowtowed again. "You did well. Yes, that's it. Whip me a few more times," Zhou encouraged. Only then did the white specter stand up shakily and lash at Zhou's body again. Just like before, it retracted the moment it touched his clothes. Zhou found a place to sit down and took out his phone to watch as he let the white specter torture him. "This side. Harder here. My shoulder is a little sore. Hit this side for me. Use more strength." Zhou would occasionally instruct the white specter where to hit. "That works?" Lu Yun and Chu He were dumbfounded as they watched from outside. The originally terrifying atmosphere vanished. The white specter held the vine whip and served Zhou like a technician in a massage parlor. Chapter 646. Only when the torture chambers on the entire street were closed did Zhou be forcefully teleported out and returned to the stone slab he was previously on. Zhou, Lu Yun, and Chu He looked at the stone slab beneath Zhou's feet and saw that the number on it had changed to 1369. In other words, Zhou had obtained a total of more than 1,000 steps while the torture chamber was open. This was the same number Zhou had secretly memorized. So this can really increase the number of steps. Zhou felt much more relaxed. With the Hell King's power, the problem of his steps was resolved. However, he couldn't completely relax. Although the Hell King's power could intimidate the torture chamber, it couldn't resist the rules of Netherworld City. Zhou maintained the Hell King Life Soul state and took a step. The following steps would still decrease, indicating that the rules of Netherworld City were still effective against him. Now, he had only resolved the problem of the number of steps. The 3 ironclad laws of Netherworld City had yet to be resolved. He had to think of a way to leave as soon as possible. How did you do it? He looked at Zhou in surprise. He had never seen anyone suffer torture like Zhou. Lu Yun also wanted to know how Zhou had done it. This fellow constantly surprised him. He originally believed that he was doing pretty well. Although he wasn't a member of the 6 families, he had resources and techniques that the young geniuses of the 6 families didn't have. However, he never expected Zhou to be even more exaggerated than him. He had all sorts of good things and abilities. It was as though he could resolve anything he encountered. Perhaps my essence energy art has a restraining effect on the white ghoul in the torture chamber, Zhou said in a half-truth. Junior brother, you won't abandon your adorable and kind eldest senior brother, right? Lu Yun was somewhat worried that Zhou would leave after having the number of steps. How can that be? I'm still hoping that you will take me to the endless sea of stars, Zhou said. Junior brother, you're right. After we leave, I'll definitely take you to the endless sea of stars and help you obtain Star Stealer. Lu Yun paused before saying, but you can move freely, but I don't have enough steps. What should I do? When the torture chamber opens again, you will choose the same torture chamber as me. When the time comes, I'll get the white ghost to take care of you. You will naturally have a plan, Zhou said. Teacher, you really have good taste. Junior brother, you're really a shocking genius. Apart from you, even if the 6 heroes were to revive, they wouldn't be as glorious as you. Lu Yun said obsequiously. Zhou didn't believe a single word he said. A person like him always spoke the same mind. No one knew which of his words was true and which was false. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to visit the endless sea of stars, Zhou really didn't wish to stay with Lu Yun. Although he was also Fang Mingyuan's student, perhaps because Lu Yun had entered society a few years earlier than them, they felt that he wasn't as trustworthy as Jiang Yan, Zhong Zia, and Hui Haifeng. Of course, it might also be because Zhou had never interacted with Lu Yun. The 3 of them waited for another hour. After the bell rang again, the torture chamber opened again. Zhou chose to enter the whipping chamber. Lu Yun and he also chose to be whipped. The 3 of them hung side by side in the whipping chamber. Immediately, 3 white ghosts appeared. Each of them had a vine whip as they were about to whip them. The moment Zhou Hell King Life Soul appeared, the 3 white ghosts immediately knelt to the ground. All of them trembled as though Zhou would eat them at any moment. Therefore, the 3 of them sat side by side in the whipping chamber to be tortured. For the first time, Lu Yun experienced the feeling of being raised high and gently lowered. He grunted comfortably and said, Junior brother, if I had known you had this ability, I wouldn't have suffered the pain of being whipped. I only realized it after entering the torture chamber, Zhou said casually. After the torture chamber closed, Zhou steps were close to 3,000. Chu He and Lu Yun also had more than 1,000 steps. As long as we do it again, we should have enough steps to reach the Netherworld Divine Throne, Lu Yun said happily. Just as Zhou was about to say something, he saw someone's body explode on the long street. Blood splattered all over the ground, but it was quickly absorbed by the ground. That person used up all his steps and couldn't withstand the punishment. He ended his life, He said with a sigh. Zhou realized that there were fewer people on the long street. Now there were only 24 people left. The few that had disappeared had probably died in the torture chamber. The 3 of them continued waiting. As for Zhou, he used the taboo power of Netherworld City to constantly train the Jade Infant. Originally, the Jade Baby looked cold like a jade sculpture. Later, it turned into a crystal. However, with the baptism of the taboo power, the Jade Baby gradually became soft. It was like a transparent jelly. It was as though its body had become soft. Is it about to break through? Zhou could vaguely sense that the Jade Infant was really about to break through. It was only half a step away. An hour passed again. The 3 of them were tortured again. When they came out, Zhou steps had already exceeded 4,000. The 2 of them were almost at 3,000. This should be enough. Let's go. Lu Yun was in high spirits as he led the way forward. Chu He naturally followed them. Zhou wanted to take Chu He out and investigate if he was the real Chu He. Soon, Zhou discovered some problems. Chu He's combat standards were very poor. He hadn't advanced to the epic stage and was only at the legendary stage. When they encountered dimensional creatures on the way, Zhou and Lu Yun helped him fend them off. Professor Chu, you don't seem to be good at combat. How did you walk so far before we came? Zhou asked Chu He in puzzlement. Chu He thought for a moment and said, Before you came, I don't think I stepped on a stone slab with a cause of death. Then, Professor Chu, your luck is really good. Although Zhou had some doubts, he couldn't think of any other possibility apart from this explanation. Soon, Zhou and company caught up to the people in front of them. However, all of them seemed numb. Zhou and Lu Yun wanted to communicate with them, but they only grunted as though they were on the verge of collapse from despair. Forget it. There's no way to communicate like this. Let's leave quickly, Lu Yun said. Zhou nodded and continued walking forward. Every time he encountered someone, Zhou would attempt to communicate with them. However, the further he went, the more numb they became. The few people behind them ignored them like wooden puppets. There seems to be something wrong with these people. When I first saw Professor Chu He had similar tendencies. However, he was the closest to the city gate, and his symptoms were the mildest. It's no wonder I found Chu He a little odd from the beginning. I thought it was because he hadn't spoken to anyone for too long, but from the looks of it, Zhou thought to himself. However, because Chu He was beside him, he didn't say anything. Soon, the three of them reached the end of the long street and stepped onto the stone step. Every step they took on the stone steps doubled. One step was equivalent to taking 3 steps on the stone slabs. However, the 365 stone steps required more than 1,000 steps. Only Zhou had enough steps. Chu He and Lu Yun didn't have enough. Zhou had no choice but to wait for the bell to ring again and get them to find a torture chamber nearby to be tortured. After obtaining enough steps, he climbed the stone step. Clang! When Zhou rang the bell, he saw the golden divine throne slowly open. Behind it was the door to Netherworld City. He could already see the desert outside. However, City Lord Netherworld stood in the middle of the Netherworld divine throne, blocking their path. City Lord Netherworld glanced at the three of them before fixing his gaze on Zhou. Zhou was already prepared for battle. He didn't believe that it would be that easy to leave Netherworld City. You can leave, but he has to stay. City Lord Netherworld didn't attack. All he did was extend his index finger and point at Chu He. He can also ring the Netherworld bell. Why can't he leave? Zhou asked with a frown. Because he's already a dead person, City Lord Netherworld said indifferently. What do you mean? He's clearly a living person. How can he be a dead person? Lu Yun said. Zhou suddenly thought of something as he turned to look at Chu He and asked, Professor Chu, what's the exact date you entered Netherworld City? It should be March 8th of the 28th year. Why? Chu He asked in surprise. Zhou expression immediately changed. This was because the 28th year was the year the old professor and company headed to Zhuolu. In other words, Chu He had already entered Netherworld City that year, but he had always believed that he had only entered Netherworld City today. Then, there was only one possibility. With Chu He's abilities, it was impossible for him to survive in Netherworld City. Therefore, he had long died. However, Chu He was now standing in front of him alive and well. It was hard to believe that he was a dead person. Chapter 647. No. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Chu He cried out in horror as he touched his body as though he was trying to confirm if he was really dead. Lu Yun was abnormally bold. He reached out and tugged Chu He's face. He said in disbelief. He's clearly a normal living person. How can he be dead? Zhou couldn't tell how Chu He looked like a dead person. His body was normal. His heartbeat was normal, and his body temperature was normal. Apart from his slow thinking, he couldn't tell how he looked like a dead person. However, if he wasn't dead, it was hard to explain why he had entered Netherworld City so long ago but said that he had only entered Netherworld City today. Aren't you afraid that his soul will dissipate and disappear from the world forever? Take him out of the city, City Lord Netherworld said as he made way. Can we really leave? Lu Yun looked at City Lord Netherworld in disbelief. He had been in society for years, so he naturally knew that human words couldn't be trusted. Furthermore, the person who said that was a dimensional creature and the owner of Netherworld City. This was true nonsense. As long as he isn't afraid of his soul dissipating, feel free to leave Netherworld City, City Lord Netherworld said indifferently. Professor Chu, what do you think? Do you want to leave with us? Lu Yun asked Chu He. I want to go out. I'm not a dead person, Chu He hurriedly said. Zhou looked at City Lord Netherworld and asked, We both entered Netherworld City. Why aren't we dead, but Professor Chu He is? However, City Lord Netherworld seemed to be very patient. He glanced at Zhou and answered, When you entered the city, didn't the gates of hell make it very clear that no one can violate the 3 ironclad rules of Netherworld City? Since he didn't walk out alive the day he entered the city, he's naturally dead. I'm not dead. I'm really not dead. Don't believe him. Take me away. Chu He's eyes were bloodshot and his mental state was very unstable. This couldn't be blamed on Chu He. Anyone who suddenly heard someone say that they were already a dead person, and that it was said in such a logical manner, would almost believe it. They would be as nervous as Chu He. Professor Chu, don't be anxious. I believe you. Follow us out of the city, Lu Yun said as he patted Chu He on the shoulder. Although Zhou had his suspicions, he couldn't confirm that Chu He was really a dead person. After some hesitation, he looked at Chu He and said, Professor Chu, it's your choice to leave this place. I'll go with you. I'm really not a dead person, Chu He said immediately. All right, let's go. Zhou stared at City Lord Netherworld as he moved towards the door formed by the Netherworld Divine Throne. Chu He and Lu Yun followed beside Zhou as they walked out the door. At the same time, they carefully guarded against City Lord Netherworld, prepared to fight at any moment. However, City Lord Netherworld only stood by the side and watched. He had no intention of stopping them. Outside the desert, the sun was high in the sky. Outside the Yellow Springs Divine Throne was bright and beautiful, but inside the Yellow Springs Divine Throne, it was dark and gloomy. Lu Yun walked at the very front. He was the first to step out and stand under the desert sun. Zhou walked at the back, constantly wary of City Lord Netherworld. However, City Lord Netherworld didn't move at all. All he did was look at them coldly. Chu He stood in the shadows, only 1 step away from the desert and the sun. However, Chu He was somewhat hesitant. Although he felt that he was definitely not a dead person, City Lord Netherworld had said it with certainty. Furthermore, Zhou and Lu Yun had said that he had been in Netherworld City for a long time. This made him somewhat afraid. I'm definitely not a dead person. I'm definitely not a dead person. Chu He gritted his teeth and extended his palm towards the sun. Just as his fingertip came into contact with the sunlight, a blue light suddenly appeared. The fingertip that he extended disintegrated and disappeared in the blue light. How can this be? Chu He screamed as he retracted his palm, his face filled with disbelief and despair. Zhou expression changed slightly. He extended his hand and extended it into the sunlight. There was no problem. He only felt that the temperature outside was very high and the sunlight was a little hot. It was still within an acceptable range. Professor Chu, can you stretch out your hand again? Zhou stood in the shadow of the Netherworld Divine Throne, maintaining his hand in the sunlight as he spoke to Chu He. Chu He hurriedly extended his hand again, but when his fingertips touched the sunlight, they immediately disintegrated. Impossible! I can't be a dead person. Impossible. I still have to return to see my family. My wife and daughter are waiting for me. Chu-hee slumped to the ground. His voice was sorrowful as tears streamed down his face. Zhou-wen was momentarily at a loss for what to do. He couldn't bear to see Chu-hee's current state as he looked at City Lord Netherworld and asked, if he doesn't leave, what will happen in the future? City Lord Netherworld said calmly, he receives punishment day after day and dies day after day. Every day in the future is his first and last day until his soul reaches absolute purity. Zhou-wen thought of the others on the long street. Those people's situation was much worse than Chu-hee's. From the looks of it, what City Lord Netherworld said was true. And after that? Zhou-wen asked again. Who knows? If you are interested, you can stay and give it a try, City Lord Netherworld said to Zhou-wen with a faint smile. Zhou-wen looked at Chu-hee, unsure of what to say. Zhou-wen, can you do me a favor? Chu-hee wiped away his tears and said to Zhou-wen. Speak. As long as it's within my capabilities, Zhou-wen said. Help me return home to take a look. If possible, help me take care of my wife and daughter. When they are in trouble, help them as much as you can. I don't have anything on me to repay you now. I only have some research on the Naya civilization. This is all I have. If you don't mind, treat it as my reward for you. Chu-hee handed the information in his backpack to Zhou-wen. Many of them were handwritten notes. Don't worry. I'll take care of them. Zhou-wen took the information and nodded seriously. Even if Chu-hee hadn't said anything, Zhou-wen would have made a trip to Chu-hee's house. He still wanted to figure out the real Chu-hee. Don't tell them that I'm here. They have already been sad once, so don't let them be sad a second time, Chu-hee said to Zhou-wen. I know what to do. Zhou-wen nodded. Go. Don't look back, Chu-hee said disheartenedly. Zhou-wen had no choice but to turn around and walk out of the Netherworld Divine Throne. The moment Zhou-wen walked out of the Netherworld Divine Throne, he suddenly heard City Lord Netherworld's voice. If you have the chance to come again, you can try enduring all the punishment. Then, you will see the real Netherworld city. However, he had already walked out. When he turned back, there was endless yellow sand behind him. There was no sign of the Netherworld Divine Throne or Netherworld City. It was as though everything that had happened was just a dream. Chapter 648. Zhou-wen suddenly felt something amiss in his hand. He looked down and saw that the notebooks in his hand seemed to be burned by an invisible flame as they were turning to ashes. Oh no! Zhou-wen immediately reacted. These notebooks had long been destroyed with Chu-hee's death. What Chu-hee had given him couldn't be allowed to exist in the human world. Before the notebooks were completely reduced to ashes, Zhou-wen flipped through a few pages. However, before he could read much, the information had already been reduced to ashes. They scattered with the desert wind and vanished without a trace. It's really like a dream. I never expected that I, Lu Yun, would return alive after taking a trip to the Netherworld. I'm really lucky, Lu Yun said with lingering fear. Don't think about that for now. Take a look and see if you can tell where this place is. Can you still find the way to the endless sea of stars? Zhou-wen perked up and sized up his surroundings. There was yellow sand all around him. All he could see was an endless desert. Zhou-wen couldn't even tell the direction. No problem. Leave it to me. However, do you really want to go to the endless sea of stars? We seem to be a little too unlucky. I'm afraid something will happen again. Lu Yun glanced at the bamboo blade on Zhou-wen's waist before throwing the orchid blade back to him. He didn't want to carry it with him any longer. Do we have to stay at home all day just because we're unlucky? What's the point of living like that? Zhou-wen said as he took the orchid blade. That's true. All right then, let's continue. Lu Yun didn't say anything else. He looked around and summoned his companion beast to dig a deep hole as though he was observing the sand or something else. It was unknown how Lu Yun determined his location. As he led the way, He observed the plants and sand in the desert before slowly adjusting his direction. The desert was vast to begin with. After the dimensional storms, it became even wider. Even an epic expert would probably be trapped to death if they didn't know the way. Thankfully, Zhou had brought plenty of water and food, so he didn't have to be afraid of being trapped to death in the desert. They walked and stopped. On the fourth day, an oasis appeared in front of them. "We're here," Lu Yun pointed at the oasis and cried out in joy. "Is that oasis the endless sea of stars?" Zhou asked in surprise. "No, that oasis is where I usually replenish my water. However, now that we're here, we're not far from the endless sea of stars. We'll arrive in 2 days at most," Lu Yun said. Zhou was somewhat at a loss whether to laugh or cry. He had plenty of pure water in his chaos space, so he didn't need to replenish it at the oasis. However, Zhou didn't tell Lu Yun about the chaos bead. He had always taken water from his backpack, so Lu Yun naturally didn't know about this. He had been scrimping along the way and was extremely thirsty. He only took a tiny sip of water to quench his thirst. There were many plants that Zhou didn't recognize growing in the oasis. It was a type of tree, but it looked like some kind of grass with thick root. It looked very strange. What surprised Zhou even more was that there was a city in the oasis. However, the city was very simple. The city walls were made of sand, which looked like a rough version of concrete. This is Hat City. Legend has it that it was built by the residents of the desert in the past. Back then, there was plenty of water here, but as the water source decreased, many residents left Hat City, causing it to gradually become deserted. According to the elders in the desert, Hat City could accommodate tens of thousands of people at its peak. However, due to the decrease in water sources, the oasis has shrunk. Most of the buildings have been buried under the yellow sand. Coupled with the arrival of the dimensional storms, there's no one here anymore. Apart from some guides in the desert who occasionally come here to replenish their water, there's not even a shadow to be seen. As he spoke, Lu Yun had already led Zhou into Hat City. Indeed, just as Lu Yun had said, many of the buildings here were half buried in the yellow sand. These buildings were likely made from local materials, using yellow sand mixed with unknown things to create a material similar to concrete. Not long after entering the city, Zhou saw a black behemoth. On careful look, it was a black cube. "There's actually a black cube in Hat City?" Zhou was somewhat surprised. "What's so strange about that?" "Many human ruins have black cubes," Lu Yun said disapprovingly as he walked towards the well in the oasis. The well in the desert was more like a cellar. There was a staircase that led down, and deep in it was a pool. However, the water in the pool didn't look clean. Lu Yun excitedly poured the water into the water bag. Zhou stood motionless. He didn't want to drink the water. "Why aren't you filling it with water? In the desert, water is life. You can lack anything, but you can't lack water," Lu Yun said to Zhou. "Can't you just have water?" As Zhou spoke, he left the well and wanted to take a look around Hat City. However, just as he came out of the well, he saw the black cube light up. The screen was playing the scene of 2 companion beasts fighting. One of them was a giant that was completely golden. The other companion beast was Orochi, which Zhou had long seen. The golden giant roared like a god of war. Every punch produced a dazzling light that resembled the sun. Orochi's 8 heads spewed out essence energy of various attributes, but it failed to stop the golden giant's attack. However, its 8 tails were able to fight evenly with the golden giant. The fist and the snake tail collided, producing the sound of metal clashing. Terrifying shock waves and sparks exploded as though divine weapons were colliding. The golden giant seemed to have the advantage, but it wasn't enough to kill Orochi. Zhou watched for a while and discovered something strange. Orochi had 8 heads and 8 tails, but when it fought the golden giant, one of its tails was always stuck to the ground. The other 7 snake tails had fought the golden giant, but only that tail hadn't come into contact with the golden giant once. Just as Zhou was pondering over it, he suddenly saw the golden giant's fists collide. As they collided, a golden light was produced. The golden titan grabbed the aurora with one hand and turned it into a giant blade of light that slashed towards the Yamata no Orochi's body. This attack was far more powerful than the previous one, and it was most likely the golden titan's wheel of fate. It wanted to end this battle. At that moment, Zhou saw Orochi's tail that hadn't participated in the battle move. It quickly twitched like a rattlesnake's tail as it slashed out with an unparalleled sword beam. Clang! The golden giant's giant blade of light was sliced apart by the sword beam, and a long wound appeared on its body. It nearly slashed across its entire chest. It had nearly been killed. Thankfully, its physique was indeed strong, so it wasn't sliced into two. However, it didn't have much combat strength left. It was summoned back by its owner after admitting defeat. Chapter 649. As the golden giant was killed, the 8 heads of the Yamata no Orochi opened again and spat out 8 words. The Federation is useless. The heroes are shameless. This wasn't the first time these words had appeared. To be precise, it was the 3rd time. Apart from the defeat of the Ice Elemental Spirit King, there was a mythical dimensional creature that challenged Orochi in the middle but was defeated. After that victory, Orochi also spat out the same words. Now that the golden giant had been defeated again, the entire Federation seemed to explode. All public opinion was questioning the abilities of the 6 hero families. If they couldn't even deal with a single Orochi, how could they protect the peace of the Federation? There were even some sharper media outlets that directly used headlines like, "Are the descendants of heroes still heroes?" These headlines strongly criticized the inaction of the 6 great clans. Especially the media in the West District, they bombarded the family clan of gods and the Cape family. The Zhang, Xia, and Dugu families hadn't taken action yet. Although they were constantly doubted, they weren't as miserable as the other 3 families. After all, they had never been defeated. In theory, they still had the ability to win. They were different from the Cape family and the family clan of gods, who had been defeated consecutively. The 6 families also had their own difficulties. Their various schemes and arrangements were all prepared to win the championship. Now, the sudden appearance of Orochi had disrupted their plans. If they exposed their trump cards, it wouldn't be difficult for them to kill Orochi. However, if that happened, they would lose the chance to vie for first place with the other families. Therefore, they could only send inferior mythical companion beasts to fight, but they were still defeated. The Zhang, Xia, and Dugu families were even more depressed. At this moment, the backbone of their families had gone to the southern border dimensional zones. Although there were still others who could fight, the companion beasts were also in the midst of their plans. Exposing them ahead of time would trigger a chain reaction and disrupt their plans. As such, the Federation's situation became very delicate. None of the 6 families were willing to expose their top mythical companion beasts, but they ended up being defeated by Orochi 3 times in a row. It made the entire Federation feel humiliated. From the looks of it, I can only expose some things in advance. Those families are shameless, but our Xia family can't. Xia Dongyue was still hesitating about which mythical companion beast to send. Not only was Orochi proficient in various elemental powers, but it also had a powerful physique. Coupled with its indestructible sword beam, it could be said to be a very well-rounded mythical companion beast. It wasn't easy to defeat it cleanly and beautifully. Why did Lu Chuan go to the southern border at this time? Xia Dongyue thought gloomily. If Xia Luchuan was around, his companion beasts were the best at restraining companion beasts like Orochi. If the enemy wasn't prepared, it wouldn't be impossible for him to kill them in one strike. Unfortunately, Xia Luchuan wasn't around, giving Xia a headache. The Xia family was not the only one who was having a headache. The other 5 great families were also having a headache. At this point, if the Yamata no Orochi was not destroyed, the reputation of the 6 great families would be tarnished. The few families had the intention of sending their top companion beasts to fight, but at that moment the black cube lit up. The media had been bombarding the 6 families for their inaction, hoping that they could step forward as soon as possible. Just as they were in a frenzy, they realized that the black cube had lit up. They imagined that the 6 families had taken action. However, they soon realized that the person who appeared on the cube's screen was Tyrant Behemoth, who had previously forfeited. Why is Tyrant Behemoth out again? Didn't it not dare to accept the challenge previously? It should be challenging other companion beasts, right? Forfeiting means that it already knows that it's no match. Now that it has appeared again, it's definitely not challenging Orochi. Anyone can tell that a companion beast like Orochi is Tyrant Behemoth's nemesis. No matter how powerful its physique and strength are, it can't withstand Orochi's indestructible tail. Everyone imagined that Tyrant Behemoth wanted to challenge other companion beasts and ascend the rankings again, but to their surprise, when the challenged name lit up on the rankings, it was Orochi. What's going on? Didn't he forfeit previously? Why is he challenging again? What kind of play is this? Despite knowing that the companion beast's characteristics are restrained, he still wants to forcefully challenge it? Could it be that our Federation really doesn't have any more powerful companion beasts? Can we only let the restrained Tyrant Behemoth fight? Instantly, doubts and guesses sounded everywhere. People were discussing why Tyrant Behemoth was challenging Orochi at this moment. Zhouwen didn't think too much about it. He was also a member of the Federation, so he felt uncomfortable being insulted like this. Of course, the main reason was that Zhouwen had the intention of competing for the rankings. Furthermore, he could defeat Orochi, who had used Tyrant Behemoth as a stepping stone. After watching the battle between Orochi and the Golden Giant, Zhouwen already knew Orochi's strength. It wasn't difficult for Tyrant Behemoth to defeat Orochi. It was just a small effort. Not only could he be ranked high, but he could also intimidate everyone. He could also strike at the devils overseas. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone, so why not? Therefore, Zhouwen summoned Tyrant Behemoth and got it to board the cube to challenge Orochi. Is he finally going to come out? Yusuji now looked at Tyrant Behemoth on the cube's screen and chose to accept the challenge without any hesitation. She knew that Tyrant Behemoth's owner must have studied Orochi for a long time, but she was confident that with Orochi's characteristics, it could definitely restrain Tyrant Behemoth. With her command, it definitely wouldn't lose. The media all over the world saw Orochi accept the challenge. Instantly, all the major channels and online platforms were broadcasting the cube. Can Tyrant Behemoth win? A little boy held his mother's hand as he stood in front of the big screen by the street and asked worriedly. He will definitely win, his mother comforted him gently. But we've already lost twice. The boy was still somewhat worried. Don't worry. No matter how many times we lose, the Federation will always have a hero who can step forward to save the world. Perhaps that hero is Tyrant Behemoth, his mother said. The boy didn't say a word. He only clenched his fists and looked nervously at the big screen. Boom! Orochi landed in the arena. Its huge body was ferocious and terrifying. Its 8 snake heads raised and its sinister eyes stared intently at Tyrant Behemoth. Tyrant Behemoth still maintained its height of a few meters and didn't gigantify. Compared to the massive Orochi, it appeared somewhat weak. However, everyone knew that Tyrant Behemoth could still gigantify. Its body wouldn't be smaller than Orochi. To everyone's surprise, Tyrant Behemoth didn't enlarge. Instead, it leaped up and threw a punch at one of Orochi's heads. Chapter 650. Orochi didn't underestimate its enemy. The 8 snake heads spat out essence energy bullets of different attributes at the same time. Its 7 tails also danced wildly as they lashed at Tyrant Behemoth. Roar! A roar shook the world. A crown appeared on Tyrant Behemoth's head. Although its body didn't grow larger, its entire body was bathed in a bloody red light as though it had been augmented by some magic. Bam! 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 Tyrant Behemoth's fists constantly swung out like a storm. The essence energy bullets spewed out by Orochi were blasted apart by Tyrant Behemoth's fists like fireworks exploding in the sky. The 7 snake tails collided with his fist, and a terrifying sound of metal colliding rang out. The snake tails were forcibly sent flying, and the scales on the snake tails were smashed into pieces. Bam! Tyrant Behemoth rushed in front of Orochi and punched its head, sending its entire body flying. Orochi tumbled far away before stopping. As for the snake head, most of it had been shattered by the terrifying power augmented by the violent crown. How powerful! It's even stronger than the Golden Giant. As expected of Behemoth. Such strength is really too powerful. I'm afraid no companion beast can match it in terms of strength. Mommy, Tyrant Behemoth is so powerful. It's really powerful. The boy held his mother's hand and shouted excitedly. That's right. It's really powerful. His mother nodded with a smile, but she was still somewhat worried. This was because she knew very well that Orochi's true trump card had yet to be used. As for the snake tail with a terrifying sword beam, it was the nemesis of a physique and strength type companion beast like Tyrant Behemoth. Many people had the same worry. Orochi's tail sword beam was just too powerful. Up to now, no companion beast had been able to withstand a single strike from the tail. Although Tyrant Behemoth had displayed overwhelming strength, it was hard to say if it could withstand the snake tail's attack. Yusuji now didn't make them wait too long. The moment Tyrant Behemoth charged over again, Orochi suddenly raised its tail. With a cold sword beam, it instantly streaked across the void and slashed at Tyrant Behemoth's body. Everyone knew that the moment that truly determined the outcome was about to arrive. As long as Tyrant Behemoth couldn't withstand the snake tail strike, it would definitely be defeated. Everyone wanted to know if Tyrant Behemoth, which could devour Chimera, could devour the terrifying sword beam. When the boy saw the sword beam formed by the snake tail, he nervously grabbed the corner of his mother's clothes. He had already seen the same plot once. The Golden Giant had the upper hand, but it had been defeated by the snake tail sword beam. All it could do was admit defeat and flee in a sorry manner. However, to everyone's surprise, Tyrant Behemoth didn't use its mountain-devouring skill. It continued brandishing its fist to meet the shocking sword beam formed by the snake tail. However, at that instant, Tyrant Behemoth's body seemed to shrink again. The strange red light on its body also turned black-red. Tyrant Behemoth's entire body seemed to have turned into a black hole. When light landed on it, it couldn't escape. Clang! Tyrant Behemoth collided with the sword beam and it immediately shattered. The fist collided with the snake tail. The indestructible snake tail failed to cleave apart Tyrant Behemoth's fist. It only left a sword mark on the fist, but it failed to slice it open. Oh my god, audience, did you see that? Orochi's killer move failed to split apart Tyrant Behemoth's fist. That terrifying killer move that almost killed the Golden Giant with one strike only left a sword mark on Tyrant Behemoth's fist. Such an injury can't affect Tyrant Behemoth's combat strength at all. Some of the more agitated commentators had already shouted, "Mommy, it blocked it! It blocked the snake's tail!" The little boy also shouted excitedly. Before his mother could answer, Tyrant Behemoth had already grabbed the snake tail and exerted strength, throwing Orochi's body up. Bam! Orochi was smashed to the ground. Before Orochi could react, Tyrant Behemoth grabbed the snake tail and smashed it left and right, smashing Orochi's body to the ground like a sandbag. In a few blows, most of its bones were shattered. It was as though it had turned into a pool of soft meat. The snake head turned limp. It's too violent and bloody. Orochi isn't Tyrant Behemoth's match at all. It's constantly being ravaged. Oh my god, I can't believe my eyes. Is that still the terrifying Orochi? In front of Tyrant Behemoth, it's like a slug. Yes, that's it. Kill it and let those fellows overseas know the true strength of US Federation people. How tragic. After this battle, I don't think those crawlers will be able to open their mouths to spit words again. I can't tell how many heads it has. Or perhaps they have all been smashed to smithereens by Tyrant Behemoth. The streamers from the various media outlets got high as they began to tease. They no longer had the serious expressions they had when they were criticizing. Their words also began to become humorous as all sorts of lewd remarks flew everywhere. In contrast, there were more talents in the audience. Many people watching on the internet sent a large number of bullet screen comments. Orochi is considering which head to use to make a distress call. Oh, sorry. I forgot that it doesn't have hands. What should I do? Daddy, stop hitting. I know I was wrong. Mommy, love me again. Everyone, please make way. I don't want to just see the bullet screen comment. Give me some images. I want to see if Orochi is dead. Everything happened too quickly. Yusuji now never expected the power of Orochi's wheel of destiny to fail to even slice through Tyrant Behemoth's fist. She wanted to admit defeat and summon Orochi, but she felt that Orochi was sucked in by a terrifying force. She couldn't summon it back. Bam! With another heavy strike, Orochi's body fell to the arena. Orochi no longer seemed to have any bones as it slumped to the ground. Tyrant Behemoth roared as its body instantly expanded like a small mountain. It was even taller and more majestic than Orochi. With one claw, it picked up Orochi's tail and threw it into its mouth. Ghastly Killer's spirit body appeared on Yusuji Nao's body as a demonic glow emitted from her body. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood as her face instantly turned pale. However, she finally retracted Orochi. In the arena, Tyrant Behemoth's fangs missed. Orochi's body vanished, but this didn't affect the Federation citizens' revelry. Dear viewers, thank you for witnessing this great moment with me. Tyrant Behemoth lives up to its name as a tyrant. It's the undeniable king of companion beasts, the nightmare of all enemies. His tyrant is my king. Thank you, His Majesty Behemoth, for bringing us such an exciting battle. Chapter 651. My Behemoth. My Behemoth. That's my Behemoth. The resentment in Zhang Zhao's heart expanded infinitely. It was a companion beast that should have belonged to him. The entire Federation was guessing who Tyrant Behemoth's owner was. Most people guessed that Tyrant Behemoth was from the family clan of gods or the Cape family. The people of the West District were also proud of this. They expressed that at critical moments, their West District companion beasts were still reliable. Upon seeing Tyrant Behemoth win, and its name replace Orochi in fourth place, the boy jumped up and cheered. He pulled his mother's hand and shouted, "Mommy, it won. It really won." "That's right, it won." His mother smiled and nodded. "Mommy, I also want to have a Tyrant Behemoth." The boy looked at his mother longingly. His mother rubbed the boy's head. Powerful companion beasts are unique. Tyrant Behemoth is such a companion beast. When you grow up, you will definitely have a companion beast as powerful as Tyrant Behemoth. Definitely. I can't wait to grow up. But before that, Mommy, can you buy me a Tyrant Behemoth doll? The boy looked at his mother in anticipation. His mother smiled. Of course not. If we can't buy it, we'll produce it ourselves. You can also participate in the design. Really? That's great. I have to design the most perfect Tyrant Behemoth doll. The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. As for the various media outlets, they reported Tyrant Behemoth's victory with all sorts of praises. They didn't hesitate to use all sorts of exaggerated words. The titles of the strongest companion beast in the world, the extremely violent battle pet, the strongest pet on the surface, and so on landed on Tyrant Behemoth. Although everyone knew that Primordial Sword Immortal was still the strongest companion beast at present, Tyrant Behemoth had won a special battle during a special period. It made most people in the Federation acknowledge Tyrant Behemoth psychologically. This psychological recognition had a certain relationship with strength, but it wasn't absolute. Therefore, even with Primordial Sword Immortal and Death of the Underworld ranked ahead, it didn't affect the Federation's citizens from praising Tyrant Behemoth as the Federation's #1 battle pet. As for the 6 families, they increased their investigations, hoping to find Tyrant Behemoth's owner. This battle allowed them to see how terrifying Tyrant Behemoth was. It was a terrifying strength that could truly vie for first place. Young Master Wen's Tyrant Behemoth is really terrifying. It looks like he has a chance of vying for first place, and Xing said with a smile. And Tianzhua sat there reading documents as if he hadn't heard Xing's words. Zhou naturally didn't know so much. He unsummoned Tyrant Behemoth and entered the desert again under Lu Yun's guidance. Not long after he left Hat City, the mysterious phone vibrated. Zhou took out his phone to take a look and realized that the download of the Netherworld City dungeon had been completed. An icon of Netherworld City appeared on his desktop. Lu Yun commanded the tortoise to advance. Zhou had nothing to do sitting behind him, so he opened the dungeon. He wanted to see the difference between Netherworld City in-game and real life. The blood-colored avatar appeared at the entrance of Netherworld City. The ghostly face on the gates of the Netherworld said the same words as in reality before the door automatically opened. He controlled the blood-colored avatar to enter Netherworld City and stepped on the stone slabs on the long street. He saw the number 366 appear on the stone slabs. It was the same as entering Netherworld City in reality. The only difference was that the blood-colored avatar was the only one on the long streets of Netherworld City in-game. There was no one else. Zhou attempted to activate God's Retreat. Just like in reality, a large amount of taboo power was immediately sucked into the Jade Infant's body. It happened to be used to evolve the Jade Infant. Since he didn't have to worry about death in-game, Zhou gave it a try to see if he would really die after taking all the steps. The outcome didn't disappoint Zhou. After the number of steps on the stone slabs reached 0, God's Retreat could only protect the blood-colored avatar for a few seconds before it exploded and died. The power was completely unreasonable, and there was no way to defend against it. After entering Netherworld City again, the blood-colored avatar appeared at the starting point of the long street. Before the torture chamber opened, Zhou controlled the blood-colored avatar to grind dimensional creatures for a while. Although the dimensional creatures here were only at the epic stage, their skills were rather interesting. Zhou planned on grinding some companion eggs that he could use for fusion in the future. Or perhaps he could grind for some essence energy skill crystals. If he could use them, it wouldn't be a bad idea to practice them himself. Now, Zhou movement technique was already considered top-notch among humans, but he was still lacking in other aspects. Apart from the demonic astral wheel, he didn't have any skills that he could use. City Lord Netherworld said that I can see the real Netherworld City after experiencing all the punishments. What does that mean? Zhou was still guessing at the meaning of the sentence. An hour later, the torture chamber opened, but Zhou discovered a problem. Although the white ghost-like imps in-game were also afraid of the Hell King Life Soul, they didn't have much intelligence. It was impossible for them to help Zhou cheat to obtain steps like in reality. A game is a game after all. It still has its limitations. It's too rigid. Zhou was somewhat helpless. There was no way for him to cheat. If he wanted to reach the end of Netherworld City, he could only accept the punishment himself. However, the blood-colored avatar shared his feelings. He would also feel pain when the blood-colored avatar was tortured. After some thought, Zhou gave up on his previous plan. He only treated Netherworld City as a place to grind companion eggs and essence energy skills. Thankfully, nothing unexpected happened this time. 2 days later, Zhou finally saw the endless sea of stars that Lu Yun had mentioned. Are you sure this is the endless sea of stars? Zhou looked ahead in disbelief. He couldn't believe that this was the endless sea of stars. In front of him was a small lake in the desert. Although it looked rather clear, such a small lake was much bigger than the artificial lake in the park. How could such a place be called the endless sea of stars? Furthermore, Zhou didn't see any stars here. There weren't even any fish in the water. Furthermore, the lake was very shallow. He could see to the bottom at a glance. There was nothing below it except sand. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like the mysterious and unfathomable endless sea of stars that Lu Yun had mentioned. Don't be in a hurry. You'll know how magical the endless sea of stars is when you take a look at it at night, Lu Yun said comfortably as he sat by the lake, took off his shoes, and extended his feet into the lake. At night, the stars in the sky twinkled. The sky here was especially clear, as though the stars would fall at any moment. Suddenly, Zhou saw a star fall from the sky. Furthermore, it was falling towards them. Sogu. Chapter 652. A meteor descended from the sky and landed on the surface of the lake, illuminating the entire lake. Strangely, the meteor that rushed into the lake at such a fast speed didn't cause any ripples in the lake. Before Zhou could see the situation underwater, he saw stars fall from the sky. A large meteor shower fell from the sky and headed for the tiny lake, forming a magnificent scene. Are those really meteors? Zhou couldn't be sure. The starlight fell into the lake, but the surface of the lake was calm. It was as though the endless starry sky contained everything. Can I make a wish? Isn't it said that after seeing a meteor, as long as you tie a knot at the corner of your shirt before the meteor disappears, the wish you make will come true? Junior brother, you can give it a try, Lu Yun said. Zhou shook his head and said, in our hometown, there's no such thing as making a wish with a meteor. Furthermore, there's a taboo that meteors are jinxes. Seeing them is inauspicious and might bring bad luck. Pooey, can't you say something auspicious? Lu Yun said gloomily. Zhou shrugged and didn't say anything else as he looked at the lake. The starlight fell like a river of stars, falling into the lake, forming points of light in the lake. It was as though countless stars had fallen into the lake, making it look like a sea of stars. Zhou condensed the dots of light and was surprised to discover that they were planet-like spheres. These spheres were like miniature planets, and the entire lake was like a starry universe with countless stars. What was even stranger was that the planet-like spheres were still revolving according to a certain pattern. It's no wonder this place is called the Endless Sea of Stars. Looking at the starlight that kept falling into the lake, Zhou finally knew why this tiny lake was called the Endless Sea of Stars. Lu Yun smiled and said, don't underestimate such a lake. There are countless stars inside. If you enter the lake now, you will be swept into the sea of stars. It's very likely that you will be lost in the sea of stars forever, never to come out again. Zhou looked around, but he didn't see the tiny palm symbol. Therefore, he asked Lu Yun, how do you enter the endless sea of stars? Where's the astral combat beast? The astral combat beasts are on those tiny balls. Those balls look small, but once we enter the lake, we will realize that those balls are planets. There are all sorts of terrifying astral beasts on them. They range from the mortal stage to the mythical stage. The astral combat beasts are one of the mythical astral beasts. After a pause, Lu Yun continued, after the meteor shower stops, we can go down. However, you have to follow me when the time comes. Don't take the wrong path. Otherwise, if you get lost in the sea of stars and enter some strange planets, it'll probably be very difficult for you to come out again. I'll take a look outside first. Zhou slowly walked around the lake, hoping to see if there was a tiny palm symbol. Because the lake was very small, he had circled it in half an hour during the day and did not find the small palm symbol. Now that the sea of stars had appeared, there was a possibility that he might find it. The inside of the lake was like the starry sky of the universe, but the outside was still as big, giving people a very strange feeling. Zhou circled the lake and carefully looked at every inch of it, but he still didn't find the tiny palm symbol. Just as he was feeling disappointed, his gaze suddenly swept across a stone monument at the bottom of the lake. The stone monument was lying flat at the bottom of the lake, and there were many star patterns on it like a star chart. "What's that?" Zhou pointed at the stone monument at the bottom of the lake and asked Lu Yun. "That's the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument. As long as I can comprehend the profundities of the star chart on it, I can comprehend the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. This is also the key to me being able to absorb and comprehend the divine skill, Star Stealer," Lu Yun said. Lu Yun knew that it wasn't that easy to comprehend the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument. Not only did it require extremely high perceptivity, but it also required a special physique. Ignoring the fact that Zhou didn't have a special physique that was compatible with the sky-stealing sun-shifting art, even if he did, Zhou, who was already at the epic stage, probably wouldn't change his essence energy art and start all over again. Zhou actually didn't have much interest in the various essence energy arts. He couldn't practice all of them even if there were too many. It wasn't difficult to simulate an essence energy art, but it was very difficult to raise it. However, since the sky-stealing sun-shifting art was necessary for Star Stealer, Zhou planned on giving it a try and see if he could use the Lost Immortal Sutra to simulate it. After circulating the Lost Immortal Sutra, Zhou carefully sized up the stone monument. The star chart on the stone monument kept changing, making it impossible for him to figure out what it meant. Furthermore, there were no words on it, making it difficult to understand. Lu Yun is actually able to comprehend an essence energy art from such a star chart. He's really a genius. When Zhou carefully sized up the star chart, he made an unexpected discovery. On the corner of the stone monument was a tiny palm symbol. However, the stars on the stone monument shimmered brightly, and it was engraved on the corner. It was covered in moss and separated by the lake. If not for the starlight illuminating it and Zhou's good eyesight, he wouldn't have been able to see it. "Eldest senior brother, can we see that sky-stealing sun-shifting monument during the day?" Zhou asked Lu Yun. "The stone monument is naturally still there during the day, but you can't see the starlight flowing on it during the day. It's just an empty stone monument. It's useless even if you look at it." Seeing that the meteor shower had ended, Lu Yun said to Zhou, "All right, let's go down now. I thought about it. The endless sea of stars is so dangerous. My luck has been very bad recently, and I've seen a jinx. I think I shouldn't go down. If you go down, help me see if you can obtain the Astral Combat Beast's Essence Energy Skill Crystal," Zhou said. "Junior brother, you didn't say that before? Didn't you say that people can't hide at home just because they're unlucky? Why are you suddenly so superstitious?" Lu Yun looked at Zhou in puzzlement. Zhou thought to himself, previously, I didn't have the tiny palm symbol, so of course I could only come out to take risk. Now that I've found the tiny palm symbol, I can go home and comfortably grind dungeons after downloading the game. Why should I take risks? Of course, Zhou couldn't tell Lu Yun this, so he said, "Actually, I mainly wanted to take a look at this sky-stealing sun-shifting monument. Since I can see it from here, I won't go down. If you want to go down, go down. If you don't, you can stay with me to study the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument." Lu Yun cursed inwardly. "I've seen this crappy monument tens of thousands of times. Why would I still look at it? You don't have my star veins of the heavens body, so what can you see? Even if you look at it for another 10,000 years, you won't be able to comprehend the sky-stealing sun-shifting art." Back then, the reason why Lu Yun was able to comprehend the sky-stealing sun-shifting art was because the star chart on the stone monument had triggered the star veins in his body, allowing them to sense the trajectories of the stars. Only then could he gain insight. Without the star veins of the heavens, just looking at the star chart was useless. Chapter 653. Alright, take your time here. However, don't go into the lake alone. It wasn't easy for me to come here. I'll go down to hunt some astral beast. If I'm lucky, I can hunt an astral combat beast and drop an essence energy skill crystal in exchange for that autograph. Lu Yun walked towards the lake. Eldest senior brother, be careful, Zhou said. Without you by my side, I probably won't be that unlucky, Lu Yun said as he entered the water. Zhou watched Lu Yun fall into the lake. The lake looked very shallow, but when Lu Yun stepped into the water, his body kept sinking as though he couldn't reach the bottom. Furthermore, when his body fell into the water, it slowly shrank. Finally, like a speck of dust, he floated towards the tiny balls and vanished in the blink of an eye. What a magical dimensional zone! When it's daytime, I'll go down to the lake to take a picture of the tiny palm symbol and download the Endless Sea of Stars dungeon. Then, I can grind however I want. Zhou sat down by the lake and carefully looked at the star chart on the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument. After looking at it for a while, the Lost Immortal Sutra took effect. The flow of essence energy slowed down before finally stopping completely. After that, the essence energy suddenly went berserk. It circulated in Zhou body in a new way. The sky-stealing sun-shifting art was different from the essence energy arts that Zhou had cultivated in the past. It was a very magical feeling. He felt like the essence energy in his body seemed to transform into countless stars that circulated endlessly in his body. Furthermore, when it circulated, it wasn't a linear flow. Instead, it was like the trajectories of real stars forming galaxies. Before long, Zhou had gained basic mastery of the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. However, it wasn't that simple to raise the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. Zhou wasn't in a rush to practice it. It was useless to be anxious. This wasn't something that could be mastered overnight. He found a rock by the lake and sat down. He took out his phone and began grinding. After daytime, he would head down to the lake to take a picture of the tiny palm symbol. After Zhou finished grinding the dungeon, there was still a long time before daybreak. Lu Yun hadn't returned. He stood up and stretched his body. He looked at the endless sea of stars and realized that there was something strange in it. During the day, Zhou had taken a very careful look. The lake was somewhat odd. There were no creatures inside. There weren't even bugs or aquatic plants, much less fish or shrimp. The entire lake was as clean as pure water. But now, Zhou saw a jellyfish-like creature in the lake. Its body was transparent like crystal, and it emitted light like a light bulb. The jellyfish-like creature bobbed up and down in the lake. When it passed by the star-like balls, it actually swallowed them into its body. Although the jellyfish itself was not big, only a little bigger than an adult's clenched fist, if those stars were regarded as planets, then the size of the jellyfish would be somewhat terrifying. This thing can actually devour planets? Zhou felt that something was amiss because he realized that the jellyfish was very close to the area where Lu Yun was. If the ball that Lu Yun is in is swallowed by the jellyfish, will Lu Yun die too? Zhou watched the jellyfish move in the water. Although it was very slow, it was moving closer and closer to Lu Yun. Eldest senior brother won't die just like that, right? Zhou was somewhat worried, but there was nothing he could do. There are too many balls in the lake. It's like a sea of stars. I only know where Lu Yun is going, but I don't know which ball it is. Even if he goes down now, it's already too late. After some thought, Zhou summoned the Golden Overlord's sword and slashed out a sword beam at the jellyfish in the lake. However, the moment the sword beam entered the lake, it became smaller and smaller. Finally, it was as small as a needle tip. Ignoring killing the jellyfish, it had already disappeared when it was still a distance away from the jellyfish. Furthermore, the sword beam had become so small. Even if it hit the jellyfish, it probably wouldn't be of much use. Eldest senior brother. It's not that I don't want to save you, but I really can't do it. Zhou slashed a few more times, but it was useless. All he could do was watch helplessly as the jellyfish approached the area where Lu Yun was. It's over. Soon, the jellyfish arrived at the area where Lu Yun was and swallowed the nearby balls one by one. When the balls entered its body, they were like glowing jelly beans. They circled around its body before slowly melting until they vanished. Eldest senior brother, I never expected you to die like this. You didn't even leave a single piece of clothing behind. I can't even build a cenotaph for you. Just as Zhou was sighing, he suddenly heard a splash. Lu Yun emerged from the lake, looking extremely wretched. His clothes seemed to be made of paper, turning into paste when they came into contact with the water. Junior brother, did you mess with me again? Do you want to burn the bridge after crossing it and let me die below? Lu Yun jumped ashore and questioned Zhou angrily. Eldest senior brother, what do you mean? I saw the monster in the water devour the balls and wanted to save you, but all my attacks became insignificant when they entered the lake. There was nothing I could do, Zhou said. If it wasn't for you secretly playing tricks, how could I be so unlucky to encounter a planet devourer? That thing usually doesn't come out, Lu Yun said with widened eyes. Eldest senior brother, you've really misunderstood me. I'm not familiar with this place at all. I still need you to take me out of the desert. Even if I wanted to attack you, I wouldn't choose such a time. Besides, if I wanted to mess with you, there's no need for me to secretly touch you, right? I knew it. It's inauspicious to see a jinx, Zhou said. Lu Yun thought that it was true and couldn't help but say gloomily, why have I been so unlucky recently? I clearly didn't see the planet devourer before I went down. Thankfully, I have the sky crossing technique. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to survive even if I had 10 lives. What's that planet devourer? It should be a mythical creature. Can it really devour planets? Zhou was rather curious about the jellyfish-like planet devourer. I don't know if it can devour planets in reality, but in the endless sea of stars, that fellow is an overlord. No matter what astral beast it is, it can devour them in one mouthful. Even the planets inside are no exception. However, the planets in the endless sea of stars are much smaller than real planet. I reckon that if that planet devourer were outside, it would at most be able to devour a mountain, Lu Yun said. Do you think my tyrant behemoth can kill it? Zhou said after some thought. I don't think so. Tyrant behemoth isn't good at water battles, right? Lu Yun said as he glanced at the planet devourer in the lake. I really don't know about that. Zhou planned on getting Tyrant Behemoth to give it a try after downloading the dungeon. Due to the planet devourer, Lu Yun didn't dare enter the endless sea of stars again. All he could do was stay by the lake with Zhou. Sogu. Chapter 654. Junior brother, you've been watching for so long. Have you figured out anything? Lu Yun sat by the side and asked in boredom. A little, Zhou said. How much is a little? Lu Yun continued asking. Without a physique that was compatible with the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument, it would be strange if he could figure it out. Therefore, Lu Yun didn't believe Zhou when he said that he had figured out a little. This had nothing to do with being a genius. It didn't even have much to do with perceptivity. Without the heavenly star veins, it was impossible for him to figure it out. This was the foundation. Just like how one couldn't build a skyscraper without a foundation, Zhou had no chance of figuring out the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. A little is just a little, Zhou said with a smile. Lu Yun curled his lips and didn't ask further. Zhou kept staring at the endless sea of stars, wanting to see what else was in it other than the planet devourer. Unfortunately, apart from the planet devourer, he didn't see any other dimensional creatures. Apart from this planet devourer, are there no other dimensional creatures in the endless sea of stars? Zhou asked. There are astral beasts on those small planets, but they only move on the planets and can't leave them. Outside the small planets, there's only one planet devourer. It's the king here. It can swallow a small planet with a single bite, and even the dimensional creatures on it will be devoured. It's an invincible existence. Apart from your eldest senior brother, who's good at deceiving the world, I can escape. If it were anyone else, even if the 6 heroes were to revive, they wouldn't be able to escape its devouring, Lu Yun said smugly. Zhou watched for a while and felt bored. He took out his phone to game and grind mythical creatures and rare dimensional creatures. If you're done watching, let's go back. Although there shouldn't be any danger if we don't enter the endless sea of stars, you know that something might happen in a place like the desert. But in a place like the Great Desert, you also know that something might happen. The two of us have been having bad luck recently. It's best we return early, Lu Yun said. I want to go into the water to take a look at the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument during the day. Perhaps I might discover something, Zhou said half-truthfully. Lu Yun curled his lips and said, Junior brother, don't blame me for being straightforward. If you can't understand it at night, what can you see when there's no starlight chart in the day? It'll just be a bare monument with some scratches. I came all the way here. I can't accept it if I don't take a look, Zhou said, unmoved. All right, we'll leave after you're done with it during the day. I'll sleep for a while. Wake me up later. Lu Yun collapsed to the side and fell asleep in less than 3 seconds. His sleeping posture was very strange. Zhou felt that he was like a cat that could jump up at any moment. After taking a closer look, he realized that Lu Yun's sleeping posture was unusual. No matter which direction he was attacked from, his posture made it easy for him to react. To be able to develop such a sleeping posture, Lu Yun must have experienced many things in the past. How could a normal person be so guarded when sleeping? Zhou senses were very sharp, but he wouldn't maintain a combat posture while sleeping because he didn't have such a consciousness. Of course, with Di Ting around, it was impossible for ordinary people to get close to him without being discovered. After gaming the entire night, although he had obtained quite a number of companion eggs, none of them were what he really wanted. Medusa, Qiongqi, and Torch Dragon didn't drop companion eggs. That shouldn't be the case. Every time I kill them, I bring the baby tiger with me. After killing them so many times, logically speaking, it should drop, right? Zhou was somewhat depressed. The night quickly passed. In the morning, the starlight in the lake surged into the sky like a countercurrent and disappeared into the void. The lake returned to normal. It looked like an ordinary lake, but it was unimaginable that it would transform into a starry sky at night. Lu Yun didn't lie to him. The sky-stealing sun-shifting monument in the lake was still there. Zhou woke Lu Yun up and asked him if there were any taboos in the lake. There's no taboos. As long as you don't enter the lake at night, this lake isn't much different from an ordinary lake, Lu Yun said with a shake of his head. Zhou tried entering the water. Indeed, it wasn't as magical as last night. When Zhou stepped into the lake, the water only reached his waist. Zhou had learned the 9 dragons art from the black dragon. He plunged into the water and quickly arrived at the spot where the sky-stealing sun-shifting monument was. Just as Lu Yun had said, during the day, this was a broken stone monument covered in moss. There were only some scratches on it, and there was no starlight pattern. If it wasn't for the tiny palm symbol engraved on it, it wouldn't have been eye-catching. When he got close, the mysterious phone vibrated. Zhou picked up his phone and took a picture of the stone monument. The phone immediately entered the download screen. After putting away his phone, Zhou touched the stone monument again. He felt that it was ice-cold like a piece of metal. He didn't dare do anything out of line as he turned around and swam back to the shore. How is it, junior brother? Did you figure out anything? Lu Yun asked Zhou with a smile. A little. Zhou nodded. You figured out a little yesterday and you figured out a little today. That's impressive. You should have gained basic mastery, right? Lu Yun teased Zhou. Yes, I've gained basic mastery, Zhou answered. Lu Yun, who was drinking water, nearly choked. He looked at Zhou Wen in disbelief and asked, "Are you for real? Have you really gained basic mastery?" "It's just basic mastery. What's so difficult about it? Didn't you gain basic mastery long ago?" Zhou Wen said casually. How could Lu Yun believe him? He reached out and grabbed a handful of sand from the ground. With a pinch of his palm, the sand condensed into a ball that looked like a huge grain of sand. Lu Yun loosened his grip again, and the huge grain of sand dispersed, turning into a handful of yellow sand again. "If you really gain basic mastery, you should be able to do it, right?" Lu Yun said to Zhou Wen. "I'll give it a try." Zhou Wen also grabbed a handful of sand from the ground and circulated the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. He pinched the sand, and the sand was sucked together like a magnet, turning into a ball. However, it wasn't as round as Lu Yun's. Holy sh*t. You really gained basic mastery of the sky-stealing sun-shifting art? Lu Yun widened his eyes as he looked at Zhou Wen as though he had seen a ghost. How can it be fake? Zhou Wen loosened his grip and the sand scattered. "Alright, I've achieved my goal. Let's go back. I'll return your autograph to you when we leave the desert," Zhou Wen said. "Little junior brother, you really are a genius in cultivation, but how did you do it? According to what I know, cultivating the sky-stealing sun-shifting art requires a special physique. You don't look like you have a special physique." Lu Yun was puzzled. He was a star vein of the heavens himself, so he naturally knew the characteristics of someone with a star vein of the heavens. Zhou Wen didn't have those characteristics. "Do I need a special physique? I don't know about that. I just casually practiced and gained basic mastery. I didn't find it difficult," Zhou Wen said. Lu Yun felt as though something was stuck in his throat, preventing him from saying a word. Chapter 655. The journey back to the city was rather smooth. He didn't encounter any sandstorms when he passed by, nor did he see Netherworld City. After leaving the desert, Zhou Wen returned the autograph to Lu Yun as promised. After Lu Yun confirmed that it was his signature, he looked at Zhou Wen with a complicated expression and said, "Junior brother, I'm afraid the entire world is searching for Tyrant Behemoth's owner. Aren't you afraid that I'll leak your secret? Although we haven't spent much time together and I don't know you well, I believe you aren't the type of person to do such a thing." Although Zhou Wen said that, he thought to himself, "It doesn't matter if it's exposed. This isn't my only trump card. Since I placed it on the rankings, I'm already mentally prepared to be exposed." "I like what you said. Don't worry. You are my junior brother after all. As your senior brother, I won't harm you. I'll help you keep your secret," Lu Yun said with a smile. It was unknown if he was telling the truth. "Alright, let's part ways here. It's time for me to return." Zhou Wen planned on splitting up with Lu Yun and rushing back to the town. The ranking battle hadn't ended. Tyrant Behemoth was currently ranked 4th, so it should still have a chance to challenge a few more times. Lu Yun clearly didn't want to continue being with Zhou Wen. Ever since he met Zhou Wen, his luck hadn't been good. He seriously suspected that it was because of the two sabers on Zhou Wen. "Junior brother, I don't know when we will meet again after today. I'll give you a farewell song," Lu Yun said heroically. "Alright." Zhou Wen nodded. He never expected Lu Yun to sing. "The lady is beautiful. The lady is wild. The lady has walked in." Lu Yun sat on the turtle's back and sang loudly. The turtle ran very quickly and soon, it disappeared from Zhou Wen's sight. Only the melodious singing echoed in his ears. Zhou Wen was speechless. He wondered what song it was, but it turned out to be a folk tune. Needless to say, the song sung by Lu Yun was quite charming. It made one have the urge to beat him up. After Lu Yun's voice could no longer be heard, Zhou Wen summoned Six-Winged and rode it back. Although it was uncomfortable, that was all he could do. As he traveled, Zhou Wen opened the downloaded Endless Sea of Stars dungeon. In fact, the dungeon had long been completed, but with Lu Yun around, Zhou Wen didn't dare open it. After opening the Endless Sea of Stars dungeon, the blood-colored avatar appeared in a cosmos. There were planets around it, but they didn't look as huge as real planets. These planets were about the size of mountains, but on these small planets there was no distinction of up, down, left, or right. On a nearby small planet there was a group of exotic beasts. These exotic beasts were running on the small planet. Many of them looked like they were below the planet, making people worry that they would fall from the planet. If it was a real planet, because it was too big, the comparison wouldn't be too obvious. On such a small planet, the visual impact of seeing a group of exotic beasts standing upside down on the planet was very strong. Zhou controlled the blood-colored avatar to fly towards the planet. At the same time, he summoned his 6-winged companion beasts and charged at the alien beasts on the planet. The alien beasts looked like humanoid mantises. When they saw the blood-colored avatar, they rushed forward, but most of them were killed by 6-winged and torch dragon's dragon breath. Killed legendary creature, fiend star mantis. Killed legendary creature, fiend star mantis. The messages kept refreshing, and quite a number of dimensional crystals dropped. There were even a few companion eggs among them. However, dimensional crystals and companion eggs of this level were no longer of much use to Zhou. Zhou went to a few nearby planets and realized that there were many types of astral beasts here, but most of them were at the mortal or legendary stage. It was rare to even see epic ones. I forgot to ask eldest senior brother Lu Yun which planet the astral combat beast is on. There are thousands of small planets here. I wonder how long it will take to search them one by one. Zhou was somewhat depressed. This was somewhat different from the endless sea of stars he had imagined. He imagined that the endless sea of stars was filled with mythical creatures. There was no other way. It was impossible to find Lu Yun now. All Zhou could do was slowly search the small planet. Thankfully, his companion beasts were very impressive. Killing the astral beasts on a small planet wasn't difficult. He didn't find the mythical astral combat beast, but Zhou discovered a strange astral beast. It was a fox with crescent-shaped starlight shimmering on its chest. After Zhou killed it, according to the notification, it was a heart lunar fox at the mortal stage. Even if a mortal stage dimensional creature dropped something, Zhou typically didn't think much of it. The chances of a companion egg dropping at the mortal stage were extremely low. It was about the same as buying a lottery ticket. Furthermore, it was useless for Zhou to have a mortal companion beast. This heart lunar fox didn't drop a companion egg either. All it dropped was an essence energy skill crystal. However, it was also very rare for a mortal stage creature. Zhou originally didn't pay attention to the mortal stage essence energy skill, but when he saw its name, he was somewhat surprised. The name of the essence energy skill crystal dropped by the Heart Lunar Fox wasn't Heart Lunar Fox Crystal, but Azure Dragon Heart Crystal. Heart Lunar Fox. I seem to have heard of this name somewhere. Zhou went online to check and couldn't help but be even more surprised. Not many modern people knew the name Heart Lunar Fox, but in ancient times, it was one of the 28 lunar mansions. The 28 lunar mansions were divided into the Eastern Azure Dragon 7 mansions, the Northern Black Tortoise 7 mansions, the Southern Vermilion Bird 7 mansions, and the Western White Tiger 7 mansions. The Heart Lunar Fox was one of the Eastern Azure Dragon 7 mansions. It represented the heart. This Heart Lunar Fox is only at the mortal stage. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be related to the 28 lunar mansions. Those are extremely powerful existences in myths and legends. They should at least be at the mythical stage. Even if it's not at the mythical stage, it's impossible for it to be mortal, right? However, the Essence Energy Skill Crystal dropped by the Heart Lunar Fox is actually called the Azure Dragon Heart Crystal. It doesn't seem right to say that it's unrelated. Zhou thought for a moment and let the blood-colored avatar absorb the Azure Dragon Heart Crystal to see what essence energy skill it comprehended. Typically, mortal stage essence energy skill crystals could be absorbed easily, but when Zhou tried to absorb them, he was notified that the essence energy art didn't match. A mortal stage essence energy skill actually needs an essence energy art to match? This was the first time Zhou had encountered such a thing. He couldn't help but feel curious. After some thought, he changed his essence energy art to sky-stealing sun-shifting before absorbing the Azure Dragon Heart crystal. This time, he successfully absorbed it. This essence energy skill was somewhat odd. Typical essence energy skills opened up a essence energy circulation route in the body. However, after the Azure Dragon Heart was absorbed, it condensed into a point in his body. It remained motionless like a nail. Absorbed Azure Dragon Heart Crystal. Attained Essence Energy Skill Heart Lunar Fox. Chapter 656. Zhou attempted to activate the Heart Lunar Fox skill, but there was no reaction. If this skill is really related to the 28 lunar mansions, could it be that I have to gather all the skills of the 28 lunar mansions to use it? Or could it be that I can use it after gathering the 7 Azure Dragon mansions? Zhou was only guessing. Up to now, there was no way to prove the relationship between the two. With an indifferent attitude, Zhou paid special attention when grinding to see if any mortal creatures dropped essence energy skill crystals. After grinding for a long time, he didn't see any similar mortal essence energy skills. After Zhou respawned the dungeon, he went to the spot where he had discovered the Heart Lunar Fox, but he didn't see it again. With the experience of grinding the baby tiger, Zhou knew that such matters couldn't be forced. Therefore, he didn't deliberately search for it. He only paid attention when grinding low-level monsters, mainly to find astral combat beasts. After another day, Zhou unexpectedly discovered that he had obtained another Azure Dragon Room crystal. After absorbing it, he obtained the Room Solar Rabbit's Essence Energy skill. However, just like the Heart Lunar Fox, the Room Solar Rabbit skills couldn't be used. Heart Lunar Fox and Room Solar Rabbit. It looks like there's no mistake. It's really related to the 28 lunar mansions, but why are the 28 lunar mansions such low-level dimensional creatures? Zhou couldn't figure out the reason, but he paid more attention when grinding. When he returned to the town inside Funyo Mountain, Zhou obtained some skill crystals related to the 28 lunar mansions. In the middle, he had the most moon foxes and Room Solar Rabbit. He had obtained 3 of each, but he couldn't take them out. It was useless even if he had more. Furthermore, these skills didn't have ranks. There was no problem of the same skills rank. Zhou also obtained the skill crystals of Hornwood Flood Dragon, D-Earth Raccoon Dog, Tail Fire Tiger, and Water Leopard of Winnowing Basket. These mortal stage dimensional creatures were strange. There were very few of them, but as long as he found them, they would definitely drop skill crystals. Nothing else would drop. The skill crystals that Zhou obtained were all from the Azure Dragon's 7 lunar mansions. Zhou had already learned 6 skills, and he was only short of the Azure Dragon's neck Golden Dragon. After arriving at the town, Zhou looked at the rankings again and realized that no one had challenged Tyrant Behemoth. It was still ranked 4th. In front of Tyrant Behemoth were still Primordial Sword Immortal, Death of the Underworld, and Fairy Undying Goo. Why isn't anyone challenging Primordial Sword Immortal? There should be less than a month left of the 3-month deadline, right? Zhou didn't wish to be a scout. He planned on returning to school that day. It wouldn't be too late for him to return after someone challenged Primordial Sword Immortal. When he reached the entrance of the town, he suddenly heard a sound coming from outside. He used Truth Listener to investigate and realized that a few people were heading towards the town. What are they doing here? Zhou realized that Xiao Xiyuan and Liz were among the people who had come. Although they weren't wearing the bureau's uniform, Zhou had a deep impression of them. He recognized them at a glance. The others looked like they were from the bureau. Zhou didn't know why he had such a judgment, but his intuition told him that the people from the bureau had a special bearing. It was very difficult to see such a bearing on ordinary people. Just like how soldiers could easily tell, it was the same for the people from the bureau. However, their temperament was somewhat different from ordinary soldiers. This was originally a good opportunity to take revenge, but Zhouwen wanted to figure out why they had come here. Therefore, he retreated into the forest and used Truth Listener to monitor their every move from afar. Clear the area. After entering the valley, Qiao Siyuan gave the order. Immediately, someone took out all sorts of equipment and summoned companion beasts. They began to get busy. Zhouwen recognized a few companion beasts. They were likely probing-type companion beasts. From the looks of it, they wanted to ensure that there were no outsiders here. With a thought, Zhouwen sneaked into the lake and hid in the water. Then, he used his Dao body to converge his aura and fuse with the surrounding natural environment. Qiao Siyuan and company busied themselves for 2 to 3 hours, taking control of the entire valley. Only then did they confirm that there was no one else here. Therefore, they transported a lot of things from outside the town. Zhouwen saw companion beasts carrying buckets of items into the town. He had no idea what was inside. "Minister, the inventory is done," Liz reported to Qiao Siyuan. "Set up a sentry post and split it into 3 shifts to monitor the situation outside. Everyone else get some rest immediately," Qiao Siyuan ordered. "Yes." Liz accepted the order and began to group the people. When Liz returned to Qiao Siyuan's side, he had already sat down in a small building. "Minister, is the blood oxypetalum really as magical as the legends say?" Liz poured Qiao Siyuan a cup of tea and asked curiously. "You should have heard of the term, ephemeral bloom, right?" Qiao Siyuan took a sip of tea and said indifferently. "I've heard of it, but I heard that it's just an exaggerated metaphor used by the people of the East District. In fact, the blood oxypetalum blooms for a few hours a day. It's not as exaggerated as a ephemeral bloom," Liz said. Qiao Siyuan nodded. "Ordinary blood oxypetalum isn't as exaggerated as ephemeral, but it's different if it's a blood oxypetalum." After a pause, Qiao Siyuan continued, "To make the blood oxypetalum bloom, you have to pour a large amount of blood. Ordinary blood won't do. It has to be the blood essence of dimensional creatures. The more blood essence the blood oxypetalum absorbs, the more beautiful the flower it blooms. Furthermore, it can produce a blood oxypetalum seed." When Zhouwen heard that, he recalled the red gem he had obtained. Previously, so many white deer had been sacrificed by the mountain god before a blood flower bloomed in the lake, producing a red gem. No matter how it sounded like the blood oxypetalum seed that Qiao Siyuan had mentioned. If the flower in the lake is really a blood oxypetalum, then are Qiao Siyuan and company here for a blood sacrifice to obtain a blood oxypetalum seed? What's the use of this thing? Just as Zhouwen was thinking, Liz gave him the answer. "Minister, can the blood oxypetalum seed really change a person's bloodline talent?" Liz asked. "That's not something I know. I've never used the blood oxypetalum seed, so I can't make a judgment. However, since the Director General wants to do this, he must have his reasons," Qiao Siyuan said indifferently. "Minister, you're right. The Director General has put in so much effort to specially prepare this blood. If it really succeeds, the seed produced by the blood oxypetalum will definitely be extraordinary," Liz said enviously. Chapter 657. Zhouwen originally imagined that Qiao Siyuan and company would soon take action, but to his surprise, they had only set up an airtight defense. Even a fly could fly in without any intention of taking action. They should be waiting for someone. Will Shin Yuqi come personally? Zhouwen felt that it would be perfect if Shin Yuqi really came personally. Zhouwen didn't dare barge into the headquarters of the bureau, but if Shin Yuqi dared to come, Zhouwen could use all his strength to see if he could make him stay. As there were many monitoring companion beasts and instruments placed around the lake, Zhouwen hid in the water, not daring to move. Any abnormalities might lead to him being discovered. After enduring for more than 2 days, He finally realized that someone had come to the town. To Zhou Wen's disappointment, the person wasn't Xin Yuqi, but a man he didn't know. Qiao Siyuan and Liz addressed the person as Censor Kai and were very respectful towards him. Zhou Wen immediately guessed that the person was Kai Jin of the Four Censors. Kai Jin held an alloy box in his hand. There was an alloy chain on the box that was connected to Kai Jin's hand. The last time the primordial crystal mine was stolen, the Bureau had suffered huge losses. Xin Yuqi had only punished Kai Jin lightly, which made him very grateful. This time, Kai Jin had made sufficient preparations to secretly come to Funyo Mountain. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. Minister Qiao, how's the defensive work here? Kai Jin asked. It's been fully monitored. We didn't discover any outsiders, Qiao Siyuan answered. Very good. Let's begin tomorrow, Kai Jin said. Liz asked in puzzlement, Censor, why aren't we taking action tonight? I've traveled such a long distance. I need to rest for the night to maintain myself in peak condition. It's better if we take action tomorrow, Kai Jin explained. However, after Kai Jin left Qiao Siyuan's temporary office, he didn't rest. Instead, he summoned a companion beast that resembled honey. There were many of them that flew in every direction. Clearly, Kai Jin wasn't at ease with their defensive setup. He had to do it again. These people from the Bureau are really more cautious than the last. Zhou Wen saw that Kai Jin had even walked through the valley. He paid special attention to the forest and lake. He even summoned a water snake-like companion beast to search underwater. Thankfully, Zhou Wen was prepared. He had dug a hole in the lake ahead of time and hid inside like a loach. It wasn't easy for him to escape Kai Jin's search. Liz was very displeased with Kai Jin's actions. Is Censor Kai doubting our ability? However, Qiao Siyuan said indifferently, this matter is of great importance. It's better to be cautious. After Kai Jin rearranged his defenses, he returned to the temporary encampment to rest. It was not until nightfall the next day that he got up and rushed to the lake with Qiao Siyuan and the others. The inspectors and various companion beasts had already surrounded the lake. Zhou Wen suddenly thought of something. When they sacrificed the blood oxypetalum later, wouldn't they have to get a lot of blood into the lake? Thinking of the lake full of blood, Zhou Wen felt a little uncomfortable. However, there were inspectors and companion beasts everywhere around the lake. It was too late for him to leave. Minister Qiao, let's begin. After arriving by the lake, Kai Jin summoned his companion beasts again to search the area before saying to Qiao Siyuan, Liz. Qiao Siyuan gestured to Liz. Liz immediately got the inspectors to take action. One by one, the inspectors opened the buckets and poured the blood into the lake from different directions. The buckets of blood quickly dyed the lake red. Each bucket weighed 50 kilograms. They had brought more than 300 buckets of blood. If so much blood was poured, the surroundings would be filled with the pungent smell of blood. Zhou Wen hid in the water and felt even more uncomfortable, but he could only endure it. Thankfully, it didn't take long for Zhou Wen to see the blood surge towards the center of the lake as though it was attracted by something. Splash! The blood oxypetalum broke out of the water and floated above the water surface. It greedily absorbed the blood in the water, and its snow-white petals quickly turned the color of blood. There was so much blood in the lake, but in less than an hour it was completely sucked dry, restoring the lake's clarity. However, the petals of the blood oxypetalum didn't bloom. However, a red glow flickered in the flower bud. Only then did Kai Jin open the box in his hand. In the huge box, there was only a palm-sized bottle. Kai Jin picked up the bottle and carefully opened it. A pair of eagle wings spread out behind him as he flew above the blood oxypetalum. He poured the blood in the bottle at the blood oxypetalum. There was only one drop of blood in the palm-sized alloy bottle. The drop of crystalline blood landed on the blood oxypetalum and quickly seeped in. Immediately, the sanguine color on the blood oxypetalum's body completely faded. The petals turned snow-white again and bloomed. The blood oxypetalum had already become as pure as a snow lotus. It wasn't stained with any blood, but in its petals, a sanguine glow surged into the sky with a thick bloodlust aura. Why is this different from the mountain god blood sacrifice situation? Zhouwen was somewhat surprised when he saw all of this. It worked. Kaijin, Qiao Xiyuan, and Liz were overjoyed. Kaijin flapped his wings and flew towards the blood oxypetalum, hoping to snatch the seed produced by the blood oxypetalum. Flower vines with sharp thorns tore out of the water and swept towards Kaijin in midair. Kaijin was truly capable, as expected of one of the four sensors. His body circled like an eagle as a sword of light flashed in his hand, slicing off the flower vines one by one. What sword is that? Zhouwen sized up the sword in Kaijin's hand curiously. The sword didn't have a corporeal body. It was completely condensed from light. It was a little like the legendary beam saber, but a beam saber should have a device to emit light. This sword was completely condensed from light without any devices. With the flower vines sliced off, Kaijin successfully approached the petals. The blood oxypetalum no longer had the strength to resist and was about to be obtained by Kaijin. Just as Kaijin was about to take out the blood oxypetalum seed, the lake beside him suddenly exploded. A blurry figure tore out of the water and reached into the blood oxypetalum first, snatching the red gem-like blood oxypetalum seed. The expressions of Kaijin, Qiao Xiyuan, and company changed drastically. Kaijin roared angrily as the sword of light in his hand stabbed at Zhouwen like a meteor. Zhouwen wore the jade crystal spirit armor and held the golden battle god halberd in his hand as he charged at the sword of light. Kacha! The sword of light was shattered by the golden battle god halberd. The golden battle god halberd's golden divine light tore through the void and stabbed at Kaijin's chest. Sogu. Chapter 658. Mythical Weapon. Kaijin was alarmed as he summoned a companion beast to block in front of him. At the same time, he quickly retreated. Unfortunately, he was still too slow. The golden battle god halberd pierced through the companion beast's body and constantly slammed into Kaijin's chest, piercing through it and lifting him into the air. Who are you? Why are you making an enemy of our bureau? Kaijin stared intently at Zhouwen as he asked while coughing blood. Zhouwen didn't answer. With a flick of the golden battle god halberd, Kaijin's body was immediately torn apart like a rag. He died and fell into the lake. Liz was alarmed as she was dumbfounded. One of the four censors, Kaijin, had been killed in one strike. He didn't even have the ability to resist. It made her feel boundless horror. Minister. Liz turned her head and realized that Qiao Xiyuan, who had been standing beside her, had disappeared. She had no idea when he had fled. Liz was immediately alarmed as she turned to run. The other inspectors also came to their senses. When they saw that Qiao Xiyuan had already disappeared, they also scrambled to escape. Zhouwen didn't chase after the inspectors. He didn't like killing, but this wasn't the reason why he didn't chase after them. The bureau was a department. Even if he killed those inspectors, they could still recruit new ones. Killing them was meaningless. Zhouwen's figure moved and instantly appeared in front of Liz, blocking her path. The golden battle god halberd was pointed at her chest as the golden divine light flickered, illuminating Liz's pale face. I'm Liz from the Cape family. Let me go and you can obtain anything you want, Liz said in horror as she stood there, not daring to move. Zhouwen looked at Liz and said indifferently, Your red convertible sports car is of good quality. It can still be driven after such a collision. When Liz heard that, her pupils constricted as she looked at Zhouwen in disbelief. She opened her mouth and shouted, You are. Before she could finish her sentence, the golden battle god halberd had already penetrated her chest, causing blood to gush out of her mouth. She was unable to finish her sentence. Liz stared intently at Zhouwen as though she couldn't believe that she was about to die. Go in peace. I'll soon get the Cape family to accompany you. Zhou raised the golden battle god halberd in his hand and Liz's body was torn apart. Zhou used Truth Listener to search his surroundings, but he didn't find Xiao Siyuan. He didn't know what method he had used to escape. Knowing that he could not stay here any longer, Zhou did not chase after the other ordinary inspectors and quickly left the Crouching Bull mountain range. After taking a detour out of the Crouching Bull mountain range, Zhou secretly returned to the academy. After returning to his dorm, he realized that the chick and antelope were staring at him covetously. He hurriedly took out the things he had prepared and handed them over. "I brought you something good. See if you like it. It's a pure specialty of the desert." After placating the two fellows, Zhou returned to his room and took out the two ruby-like blood oxypetalum seeds to compare them. The two seeds looked similar, but their sizes were different. The seed that he had just obtained was bigger, and its color was deeper. The previous one was lighter in color and looked more crystalline and translucent. When Banana Fairy saw the two seeds, her eyes lit up. She flew to Zhou side and looked pitifully at him. "You want this?" Zhou held a seed in his hand in front of Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy shook her head and pointed at the blood oxypetalum seed in Zhou's other hand. "Aren't these two seeds the same?" Zhou was somewhat surprised. The one Banana Fairy wanted was produced by the mountain god blood sacrifice. He handed the blood oxypetalum seed to Banana Fairy, and she immediately hugged it in joy. After she ran over and hugged the blood oxypetalum seed, it transformed into red light that surged towards Banana Fairy's body. Soon it enveloped her completely, forming a red cocoon. "Has she evolved?" Zhou was delighted. After Banana Fairy evolved again, she was about to advance to the mythical stage. Zhou still had feelings for Banana Fairy, who had followed Zhou for a long time. No matter how much her combat strength increased, it was a good thing for Zhou to advance to the mythical stage. "It's the same blood oxypetalum seed. Why does Banana Fairy only want the one produced by the mountain god blood sacrifice and not this one?" Zhou looked at the blood oxypetalum seed in his hand and couldn't guess the reason. He summoned the other companion beasts that hadn't evolved to see if they were interested in the blood oxypetalum seed. However, Demonic Neonate and Dr. Darkness weren't interested in it. Dr. Darkness didn't have the attribute to evolve, but Zhou felt that Dr. Darkness was very useful. He had always wanted him to evolve, but he couldn't find a way. On the other hand, Explosive Fiend Man was very interested in the blood oxypetalum seed and was eager to give it a try. "Then I'll let you have it." Zhou threw the remaining blood oxypetalum seed to Explosive Fiend Man. Without any hesitation, Explosive Fiend Man swallowed the blood oxypetalum seed. Not long after, his body underwent a strange change. It looked like he was about to evolve. Explosive Fiend Man's level was too low. Typically speaking, he should be able to complete his evolution very quickly, but to his surprise, Explosive Fiend Man had transformed into a companion egg. It looked like it would take him a while to complete his evolution. Is there a problem with Explosive Fiend Man, or is there a problem with the blood oxypetalum seed produced by the Bureau? Zhou was momentarily at a loss. All he could do was store Explosive Fiend Man and Banana Fairy into the chaos space. The blood oxypetalum seed has been snatched, Kai Jin died in battle, and Liz's fate is unknown? Xiao Siyuan, you still have the face to come back? Shin Yuqi looked at Xiao Siyuan with a gloomy expression, his face livid with anger. The Bureau's current situation wasn't good. He had spent a lot of effort to obtain the dimensional creature blood essence, especially the drop of blood of God. It was impossible for him to obtain a second drop. Not only was it gone, he had even lost Kai Jin and Liz's lives. It didn't matter if Kai Jin died, but Liz was a member of the Cape family. How to explain this matter to the Cape family was also a problem. Director General, my death isn't to be regretted. However, if I can't bring back the enemy's information, my death will be of no value. As Qiao Siyuan spoke, he switched on a video. It was the scene of Zhou when snatching the blood oxypetalum and killing Kai Jin. A mythical companion egg weapon? It looks like something from the West District, Shin Yuqi said as he looked at the golden battle god halberd in Zhou Wen's hand. I've already investigated. This is the mythical creature, golden battle god halberd, from the peninsula of God's metalwork temple. Previously, someone from the family clan of gods killed it, Qiao Siyuan said. Chapter 659. Are you trying to say that this person comes from the family clan of gods? Shin Yuqi frowned. That's not what I meant. However, from the current intelligence, the family clan of gods is most likely to have the golden battle god halberd, Qiao Siyuan said. Shin Yuqi looked at Qiao Siyuan for a while before saying meaningfully, "Your information came in time." Qiao Siyuan's expression didn't change at all. He only said, "This is what I should do. Director General, you gave me such an important mission, but I messed it up. My death isn't to be regretted. Director General, please punish me." Shin Yuqi looked at Qiao Siyuan and said with a smile, "Then go to the Cape family and explain this matter clearly." "Yes, this matter was all my fault. I will definitely explain it to Counselor Cape. It has nothing to do with our bureau." After bowing, Qiao Siyuan left Shin Yuqi's office. After Qiao Siyuan left, a person walked out of the inner room. This was a woman dressed in a suit and looked very capable. However, she was wearing a hat, and the brim of the hat was pulled down very low. Coupled with a large pair of sunglasses, half of her face was covered, and it was almost impossible to see what she looked like. However, her round, white chin and red lips were enough to leave a deep impression. "Button, what do you think of this person?" Shin Yuqi asked the woman. The woman known as Button said indifferently, "Director General refers to the person in the video or Minister Qiao. Tell me about it." Shin Yuqi rhythmically tapped his fingers on the table as though he was thinking about something. "The person in the video has an unknown armor type. His weapon is just as Minister Qiao said. It's the golden battle god halberd. The metalwork temple is the private land of the family clan of gods. Their family does have a golden battle god halberd, but that doesn't mean anything. As for Minister Qiao, he's very smart. He gave himself a chance to live and also gave the Cape family an excuse. I believe the Cape family won't make things difficult for him this time," Button said. Shin Yuqi nodded. Among the many branch ministers, Qiao Siyuan is the most capable. Furthermore, he keeps a low profile. He's not greedy for credit or fame. At the same time, he has very few hobbies. "Director General, do you think there's a problem with him?" Button asked. "This operation is highly confidential. Very few people know about it. As for the exact details, only Kai Jin, Qiao Siyuan, and Liz know. Kai Jin is an extremely careful person. Even under such circumstances, he was ambushed and the blood oxypetalum seed was snatched away. There's a high chance that there's a traitor," Shin Yuqi said after some thought. "Do you want me to check?" Button asked. "You don't have to worry about that. Help me make a trip to the family of gods and send them a copy of the video," Shin Yuqi said. Zhou had been grinding dungeons in his dorm, but it was very strange. He had obtained many of the other 6 skills, such as Room Solar Rabbit, but he hadn't obtained a single Kong Golden Dragon. If one of the Azure Dragon's 7 constellations was missing, the other 6 would be useless. In the vast endless sea of stars, he failed to find any astral combat beasts. This dungeon was just too huge. Zhou estimated that it would take him a month or 2 to finish grinding. However, if he did that, he wouldn't need to do anything. He would run out of time just by grinding the endless sea of stars. However, most of the dimensional creatures in the endless sea of stars were useless. This left Zhou very vexed. Wait a minute. There are actually 28 lunar mansions in the endless sea of stars. Then, could the distribution of the planets here be related to the 28 lunar mansions? Zhou decided to do some research. The 28 lunar mansions was the ancient method of dividing the cosmos. It divided the cosmos near the ecliptic and the celestial equator into 28 regions. If the endless sea of stars was really arranged in such a way, he could determine where the 28 lunar mansions were. However, Zhou Wen's understanding of such knowledge was very limited. All he knew was a name. He had no idea where they were distributed. He went online to search for some information, but there were many contradictions in the information online. Furthermore, it was unclear. After reading for a long time, Zhou Wen roughly figured out the distribution and location of the 28 lunar mansions. After comparing it with the Endless Sea of Stars dungeon, he realized that a portion of the star map in the Endless Sea of Stars was indeed very similar to the 28 lunar mansion, and the place where he had obtained the room's Solar Rabbit and Heart Lunar Fox skills was the Azure Dragon's 7 constellations. This region was extremely huge. Zhou Wen hadn't walked out of the Azure Dragon's 7 constellations despite grinding for so long. As expected, it's no wonder I only obtained the Azure Dragon's 7 constellations. Zhou Wen did a rough analysis and rushed to the star domain where Golden Dragon Kong was. He planned on grinding Golden Dragon Kong to see what use these skills had. However, it wasn't that easy for Golden Dragon Kong to appear. He scanned the entire Golden Dragon region, but he didn't even see Golden Dragon Kong. Don't tell me it's as difficult to grind as Poison Dragon Palm number 3. He felt that something was amiss. Now, he was short of 1 out of 6. If it was really that difficult to grind, he didn't know when he would be able to do so. How can I find Lu Yun? I have to ask which planet that Astral Combat Beast is on. Zhou Wen was extremely vexed. His understanding of Lu Yun was very limited. He didn't have his phone number or address, so he didn't know where to start. After grinding for a few days, Zhou Wen already had plans to give up. Golden Dragon Kong was indeed not easy to grind. Crack! The evolving explosive fiend man finally broke out of its shell. After the evolution, the explosive fiend man still looked like a magnetic explosion infantry. It wore heavy armor, and even the tubing was black. There was also a crystal bottle installed on its back, and one could see the red inside. It looked very strange. Zhou Wen looked at Explosive Fiend Man's stats. Explosive Fiend Man, Legendary, Evolvable, Life Providence, Lawless Strength, 21 Speed, 21 Constitution, 21 Essence Energy, 21 Talent Skill. Death List, Time Blast Companion Form, Self-Destruct Device. There weren't many changes to his stat. As expected, Zhou Wen focused on studying Explosive Fiend Man's Life Providence. Lawless, not restricted by the rules within a certain time limit. Zhou Wen couldn't help but be surprised. This Life Providence wasn't restricted by the rules. Such an annotation could be said to be rather powerful, but he didn't know what the actual effects were. Before Zhou Wen could test the effects of Explosive Fiend Man's Life Providence, Explosive Fiend Man began to evolve again, turning into an egg. From the looks of it, the energy of the Blood Oxypetalum seed is a little too powerful. It actually allowed Explosive Fiend Man to continuously evolve. I wonder where the Bureau got the blood from. Seeing that the Blood Oxypetalum seed was so effective, Zhou Wen wanted to get one for himself. As he was thinking, his phone suddenly rang. It was Li Xian. Old Zhou, quickly go online and watch the battle. A companion beast is challenging Primordial Sword Immortal. It's the Xia family's companion beast, Li Xian said excitedly. Sogu. Chapter 660. Has the Xia family finally taken action? Zhou Wen hurriedly switched on his phone and found a video website. Indeed, he found a live broadcast. The scene was a cube screen. In the cube's arena stood a black-robed, white-haired man. However, the man's lower body was that of a snake. His black clothes fluttered without any wind, and even his long white hair slowly fluttered in the air. Count of the Wind. Zhou Wen was immediately shocked when he saw the humanoid companion beast's name. Count of the Wind and Master of the Rain were famous existences who had participated in the Zhuolu battle. He never expected the Xia family to have a terrifying companion beast like Count of the Wind. That's not right. I didn't find Count of the Wind and Master of the Rain in Zhuolu. Where did the Xia family's Count of the Wind come from? Zhou frowned in thought. Logically speaking, Count of the Wind should be in Zhuolu, but he wasn't. Yet, the Xia family actually had a Count of the Wind. This made Zhou feel that something was amiss. "Old Zhou, I'm here. Open the door," Li Xian shouted from outside. "Why are you here at this time?" Zhou opened the door and saw Li Xian watching the livestream on his phone. "It's too boring to watch such a battle alone. Do you see Count of the Wind? Although I don't know his combat strength, his appearance is too cool. As expected of a famous existence in the mythical war." As Li Xian spoke, he looked inside and saw that the antelope was sleeping on the sofa. Only then did he carefully walk in and pull a stool to sit down. The Xia family's attack definitely won't be as simple as a test. As Zhou spoke, he suddenly saw a flash in the arena. Primordial Sword Immortal tore through the air and accepted the challenge. Primordial Sword Immortal was straightforward. After it appeared, the ruby on the sword hilt emitted sword beams that transformed into a rain of swords that charged at Count of the Wind. Count of the Wind floated in the air, as though an invisible wind was supporting his body. He held a peacock feather fan in his hand and fanned the torrent of swords. The invisible wind immediately blew back the sword rain, and it collided with the sword light behind it. Suddenly, there was a series of explosions, and the sky was filled with the light and shadow of the exploding sword light. A sword hum resounded through the void as Primordial Sword Immortal automatically unsheathed itself. It tore through the storm and slashed at Count of the Wind at a terrifying speed. Count of the Wind's figure drifted as though he was being carried by the wind. He easily dodged Primordial Sword Immortal's slash. However, Primordial Sword Immortal didn't stop there. He slashed at Count of the Wind again and again. Sword beams crisscrossed as though they were tearing apart the world. Although he could only see an immortal shadow, an existence that resembled a sword spirit, the powerful sword intent on his body was enough to shock everyone. Just by standing in midair with his sword in hand, he had an aura of supremacy. It was as though the entire world would be sliced apart by him the moment he struck. What a domineering sword intent! Zhou stared at Primordial Sword Immortal. Such domineering sword intent was rather similar to the domineering side of Transcendent Flying Immortal. However, it was more shocking and natural than Transcendent Flying Immortal. Its realm was higher. On the other side, Count of the Wind remained calm. Under the impact of the domineering sword intent, he seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll. It was as though he didn't think much of the terrifying Primordial Sword Immortal. However, Zhou could sense that Count of the Wind wasn't really looking down on Primordial Sword Immortal. It was just that his realm was such that he didn't think much of anything in the world. Even if all the deities in the world were his enemies, he could still remain calm even when death was at hand. Zhou looked at Primordial Sword Immortal and then at Count of the Wind. He seemed to come to a realization as his two eyes were almost insufficient. Suddenly, Primordial Sword Immortal finally moved. The sword moved like a beam of light, as though it had sliced through half the sky. It was so fast that everyone could only see the sword beam and not his movement. Count of the Wind finally moved as well. He transformed into a breeze that couldn't be seen with the naked eye and headed straight for Primordial Sword Immortal's sword beam. Boom! The breeze and the sword beam collided as a terrifying shockwave rose. The fan and sword constantly clashed, but ordinary people could only see the explosion of light. They couldn't see the two companion beasts, much less their moves. Even with Zhou Wen's eyesight, he couldn't keep up. All he could do was switch to the Small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra and use the 8 Perfections Wisdom and the Hell King Life Soul to enhance his vision. Only then could he barely see clearly. Sogu. Chapter 661. Li Xian couldn't see the trajectory of the battle either. All he could do was summon his life soul. His body was immediately covered by the carapace, and his eyes were covered by a blindfold that resembled an insect's eyes. With the augmentation of the life soul, the battle scene Li Xian saw slowed down significantly. They're too powerful. I'm not afraid of strength or ruthless skills. I'm just afraid of such highly intelligent companion beasts. A companion beast actually has such high intelligence. Even a mythical companion beast of the same level can't defeat them. This is way too bugged, Li Xian said. That's right. Intelligence is indeed a hidden attribute of companion beasts. A companion beast with high intelligence does have an advantage in battle. Zhou nodded in agreement. He also liked to use companion beasts with high intelligence. For example, Banana Fairy, Demonic Neonate, and Dr. Darkness were all highly intelligent companion beasts. Even if Zhou didn't give them orders, they knew when to do what. Sometimes, their decisions would even exceed Zhou expectations. As for brainless representatives like Tyrant Behemoth, Six-Winged, and Golden Battle God Halberd, they relied on their instincts to fight. They were much weaker in terms of intelligence. It wasn't that this wasn't good. If they were strong enough, this combat instinct could push their strength to the limits and unleash 120% of their combat strength. However, if they encountered an evenly matched opponent, such brainless companion beasts would be at a disadvantage. Zhou mind wasn't on these companion beasts. He was more interested in Primordial Sword Immortal's sword techniques and Count of the Wind's movement technique. His entire body and mind were immersed in them as he sensed the two completely different concepts. One was supreme, while the other was calm. The two were polar opposites, and these two extremes were similar to when Zhou comprehended the mythical transcendent flying immortal. Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal were evenly matched. Neither of them had the upper hand, but up to now, they hadn't used the power of the Wheel of Destiny. The ordinary citizens were scratching their heads in anxiety. This was because they could only see the multicolored light scattering everywhere. They couldn't see the exact situation of the battle. Only a few epic experts with visual abilities could see the scene clearly. Thankfully, the filming equipment was already very advanced. There would be a slow-motion replay later on, accompanied by a commentary. Only then would ordinary people be able to see it clearly. Just as Zhou was engrossed in watching, Count of the Wind suddenly left the battlefield. Then, without any warning, he admitted defeat and left the battlefield. Why did you admit defeat? The victor hasn't been decided yet, Li Xian said in a daze. As Zhou had been sensing their sword techniques and movement techniques, he had a deeper understanding of them than Li Xian. He shook his head and said, Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal are very close in every aspect. If they continue fighting, they can only compete with the power of the Wheel of Destiny. The Xia family clearly doesn't want to go all out. This is just a probe, so they can only give up. What a pity. Such a mythical battle is much more interesting than watching those brute strength-type companion beasts fight, Li Xian said. Zhou also felt that he hadn't had enough. He stood up and said, Let's go to the training grounds. I just watched their battle and gained some insights. Let's give it a try and see if it's correct. When Li Xian heard that, he agreed immediately. The two of them came to the training grounds and found an independent training room. I'll imitate Primordial Sword Immortal's sword technique. See if it's correct. Zhou picked up a practice sword and recalled Primordial Sword Immortal's sword intent as he slashed at Li Xian. Interesting, but it's not domineering enough. You still held back with this strike. It should be more decisive. Li Xian didn't use a weapon as he used his carapace to block the practice sword. Is that enough? Zhou slashed out again. At the same time, he tried his best to fuse his emotions into Primordial Sword Immortal's sword intent. Not enough. Not enough. It's still not enough. Li Xian constantly fought with Zhou Wen. As Zhou Wen's sword techniques became faster and faster, he no longer had the time to say that it was not enough. Every time Zhou Wen attacked, Li Xian would only say the word no. Zhou Wen gradually became one with his will, and his will became one with the sword. The feeling of using the sword became stronger and stronger. He gradually realized that the domineering nature of Primordial Sword Immortal wasn't because his sword techniques were fast and ruthless enough, but because he attacked where his opponent needed to be, preventing them from counterattacking. Therefore, there was no need to defend. Clang! Zhou Wen's practice sword slashed at Li Xian. Although he was only using a practice sword, it left a mark on Li Xian's carapace. It was because the sword qi was too powerful. Interesting. Again. Li Xian was very excited. Zhou Wen was also in a state of excitement. Without any hesitation, he brandished his sword and slashed at Li Xian. The more he fought, the more he found this sword technique exhilarating. Defense? What the hell is that? When I slash out with my sword, those who submit to me will live, and those who oppose me will die. There's no need for defense. With a sword in hand, I'm number one in the world. Zhou Wen became more and more frenzied as he fought. He wasn't an arrogant person, but under the influence of the sword intent, his attacks became more and more violent. Crack! Crack! Li Xian was unable to completely block Zhou Wen's sword technique. Sword marks appeared on the carapace on his body, but the carapace immediately recovered after it cracked. The self-healing speed was unbelievably fast. Clang! Zhou Wen slashed at Li Xian again. The practice sword made of special rubber couldn't withstand the domineering sword qi and shattered to the ground. Let me do it. Li Xian leaped up and pulled out a practice sword from the weapon rack. He slashed at Zhou Wen, identical to the sword technique Zhou Wen had used. Zhou Wen was alarmed. He knew that Li Xian's life soul could sense the enemy's techniques while injured and gain experience, but he never expected it to be able to learn techniques used by humans. Li Xian's strike wasn't much weaker than the one he had used previously. However, this made Zhou Wen even more excited. Don't worry about me. Use all your strength. As Zhou Wen didn't have a carapace protecting him, although Li Xian's sword technique was correct, it didn't have that domineering aura. That was why Zhou Wen said so. All right. Li Xian didn't hold back. He used all the experience he had gained from being injured in battle. Domineering sword qi immediately filled his sword. Zhou Wen recalled Count of the Wind's movement technique and concept. He began to simulate his movement technique and relied on it to deal with Li Xian. Movement techniques were Zhou Wen's forte to begin with. He was more adept at using them than with sword techniques, and he entered the state faster than with sword technique. Gully and Sadie had just seen the battle between Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal. Sadie's Eye of Odin could see more things. She wanted to study the battle between Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal with Gully, so she had come to the training grounds. They also wanted to find a separate training room, but they realized that it was already occupied. Just as they were feeling depressed, they suddenly heard the whistling sound of sword aura coming from the training room beside them. Sogu. Chapter 662. This sword aura sound. Sadie was alarmed when she heard the sword aura sound. She turned around and walked to the door of the training room. She tried pushing the door, but she realized that it was locked. However, through the crack in the door, he could see what was going on inside. Sadie leaned in front of the door and looked inside. She was immediately alarmed. "Sister, what are you doing? That's not good," Gully said as he looked at Sadie strangely. "Come take a look." Sadie pulled Gully to the crack in the door and looked inside. She saw that two people were sparring. "Why does this sword technique look so familiar?" Gully mumbled when he saw Li Xian's sword technique. "What kind of brain do you have? That sword technique is Primordial Sword Immortal's sword technique. Also, the movement technique Zhou used is Count of the Wind's movement technique. Have you forgotten it after just seeing it? Sadie said. Ah, it's true. That's the primordial sword immortal's sword art, but how does that person know the primordial sword immortal's sword art? Could he be the owner of primordial sword immortal? Gully exclaimed. My dear brother, you are really hopelessly stupid. Zhou is using Count of the Wind's movement technique. Could it be that he's Count of the Wind's master? Sadie said helplessly. That's right, isn't Feng Bo from the Xia family? How did it become Zhou? Gully was puzzled. Sadie was immediately rendered speechless. All she could do was say to Gully, Zhou naturally isn't Count of the Wind's master. The other person isn't Primordial Sword Immortal's master either. Just like us, they watched the battle between Primordial Sword Immortal and Count of the Wind and learned Primordial Sword Immortal's sword art and Count of the Wind's movement technique. How is it possible to learn sword art and movement technique just by watching a duel? Even you, who have the Eye of Odin, have to analyze and imitate for a long time before you can learn a part of it. How long has it been? They've already learned sword techniques and movement technique. Isn't this too unbelievable? Gully's eyes widened in disbelief. It's indeed hard to believe, but they did it. Sadie looked at Zhou and Li Xian with a complicated expression. Before coming to Sunset College, she was very confident that she could defeat Zhou and avenge Lance. However, after coming, Sadie realized that she was far from Zhou's match. Not only was she Zhou's match, but she couldn't even defeat Feng Qiuyan, who claimed to be learning from Zhou. The person fighting Zhou inside was similarly not weaker than her, and that person was clearly not Feng Qiuyan. How many terrifying geniuses are hidden in Sunset College? Sadie's expression was extremely complicated. The more she watched the battle between the two, the more terrifying she found it. Although Li Xian's sword techniques and Zhou's movement techniques weren't at the level of Primordial Sword Immortal and Count of the Wind, they already possessed the charm of both. They had truly comprehended the true meaning of sword techniques and movement techniques, and it wasn't just pure imitation. Bang! The practice sword in Li Xian's hand exploded as it couldn't withstand the powerful sword aura. The two of them had no choice but to stop. Old Zhou, are you still training? Li Xian retracted his life soul and revealed his true body. Gully and Sadie widened their eyes. They never expected that the person who used such a sword technique was the usually frivolous scion, Li Xian. Forget it. It's boring. I'm not training, Zhou said with a shake of his head. Zhou already understood the profundities of movement techniques and sword technique. However, it was useless to just imitate them. He needed to truly integrate movement techniques and sword techniques into his own system to be useful. And this wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. He needed time to think. Sadie and Gully clearly misunderstood Zhou's meaning. They thought that Zhou was saying that the sword technique and movement technique were too simple, so he found it boring. If someone else had said that, Sadie and Gully would have thought that they were arrogant and ignorant. However, Zhou had only watched the battle between Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal. In such a short period of time, he had already comprehended the charm of Count of the Wind's movement technique. It wasn't too much to say anything to such a genius. Seeing that the two of them were about to come out, Sadie and Gully hurriedly hid to the side. After the two of them walked out of the training grounds, Sadie said, Sunset College is really filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers, especially the Xianwen Club. I never expected that Li Xian, who usually doesn't look serious, to actually have such strength and talent. In the past, when we were in the North District, we were really frogs in a well. We underestimated the young people outside the 6 families. However, Zhou, Feng Qiuyan, and Li Xian aren't any weaker than the top geniuses of our 6 families. I wonder how many more such geniuses there are in Sunset College. They are indeed too strong. It's the right decision to come this time. With such opponents, I believe we can improve faster, Gully said excitedly. However, Sadie nodded with a heavy expression. In the past, the Federation had geniuses from the 6 families, but with the development of the times, more and more geniuses from ordinary families appeared. The influence of the 6 families was gradually declining. After this battle, the various media outlets gave a slow-motion video of the battle. Furthermore, there were professional analysis and commentary, making people watch with relish. The popularity of the battle between Tyrant Behemoth and Orochi had been completely overshadowed. Although Tyrant Behemoth was strong, it lacked intelligence. Its battle with Orochi was too simple and crude. It was far less exciting than the battle between Primordial Sword Immortal and Count of the Wind. Everyone was discussing who would be stronger if Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal fought to the end. Some people supported Count of the Wind, but more people believed that Primordial Sword Immortal was still the strongest. Otherwise, why would Count of the Wind admit defeat? The other families understood what the Xia family meant. Their Xia family had already probed Primordial Sword Immortal's strength, so they probably wouldn't take action for the time being. The rest would depend on them. Including the Overseas Devils and the 6 families, the various factions were analyzing the abilities of Primordial Sword Immortal and Count of the Wind. They were already eager to give it a try. Now, apart from not knowing what Primordial Sword Immortal's Wheel of Destiny was, Primordial Sword Immortal's abilities had basically been analyzed. Furthermore, according to various inferences, Primordial Sword Immortal's Wheel of Destiny was very likely an attack-type miracle. On this basis, the various families had come up with a strategy to deal with it. It was only a matter of time before they challenged Primordial Sword Immortal's #1 spot. Zhou didn't idle either. When he returned, he had already told Ensheng about his encounter with Chu He in Netherworld City and asked him to help investigate Chu He and his family. Ensheng placed great importance on this matter and personally went to Chu He's hometown. Now, there was finally news from Ensheng's side. According to Ensheng's investigations, Chu He's wife and daughter had always believed that Chu He had gone to Zhuelu. They had no idea that Chu He had gone to the desert. Furthermore, ever since Chu He left home for Zhuelu, he had never contacted them. He didn't speak to them, nor did he write them letters. After various investigations, Ensheng came to the conclusion that Chu He had gone to Zhuelu and hadn't gone to the desert at all. Chapter 663. Are you saying that the Chu He I met in Netherworld City is a fake? Zhou said after some thought. No, it's the opposite. I think the Chu He who went to Zhuelu is an impostor, Ensheng said with certainty. From the information we obtained, everything about the Chu He who went to Zhuelu is perfect, but this makes me feel that something's amiss. After a pause, Ensheng continued, according to my investigations, Professor Chu He had indeed studied the Taklamakan in the past. In the beginning, he had indeed rejected the expedition team's invitation, but for some unknown reason, he later agreed to the invitation. From then on, he went to Zhuelu, but during his time in Zhuelu, he never contacted his family. This makes me feel that something's amiss. In other words, someone really did something to it? Zhou asked. I can't be sure yet. If there's really someone behind it, then this faction must be no trifling matter. The other party did it too cleanly. There was no problem at all. If you hadn't encountered the already dead Chu He in Netherworld City, I'm afraid no one would have thought that the Chu He who went to Zhuelu was actually an impostor, Ensheng said. How are Chu He's wife and daughter? Zhou asked. After we investigated, their situation became very dangerous. To ensure their safety, I've already brought them back, Ensheng said. From Ensheng's tone, Zhou knew that Ensheng must have used some extreme means. If possible, take good care of them. As long as it's not an unreasonable request, try your best to satisfy them. I'll be responsible for all the expenses, Zhou said. Don't worry. They have already been brought into the manor by Madame. Madam values them very much, and Xing said. That's good. Zhou knew that Ouyanglan was as concerned about the former principal as he was. Since Chu He's wife and daughter were with her, Ouyanglan definitely wouldn't let anything happen to them. After ending the call with Ensheng, Zhou thought about what else he could do. I'm far inferior to Ensheng in investigating these matters. It's useless even if I go. If someone really did something behind the scenes, they must be quite powerful to be able to do it so flawlessly. Even if I really investigate the truth, I'll need powerful forces to resolve the problem. I'll raise my strength first. Zhou felt that what he needed to do the most now was to make himself stronger. Ding! After grinding the metalwork temple dungeon, another golden battle god halberd dropped. Just how easy is it to get this thing? This is already the 4th round. Zhou was somewhat speechless. However, having an additional mythical companion beast was also an increase in combat strength. If he really obtained hundreds of golden battle god halberds, he might be able to flatten the 6 families of the Federation with just the golden battle god halberd. Just as he was about to continue grinding, his phone rang. He opened it and saw that it was from the Dharch. Let's make a deal. Are you interested? What deal? Zhou replied. I can let you obtain a companion beast. That companion beast can help you defeat Primordial Sword Immortal and Count of the Wind, but in exchange, you have to give the divine fruit to me after you obtain it. The Dharch sent another message. What other benefits do I get if I give you the divine fruit? Zhou asked. You obtained a companion beast that can help you defeat Primordial Sword Immortal. Isn't that enough? The Dharch said. What kind of companion beast is it? Zhou asked. Come to Chess Mountain. You'll naturally know when you get it, the Dharch said. Don't tell me you want me to enter Deer Terrace Pavilion again? Zhou deliberately sent a message in an unwilling tone. In fact, Zhou also wanted to enter Deer Terrace Pavilion. In-game, he could only enter the ancient building on Deer Terrace Pavilion, but he couldn't enter the platform below. Now, Zhou really wanted to know what other way to enter Deer Terrace Pavilion other than the gap in reality. How can you obtain benefits if you don't enter Deer Terrace Pavilion? The Dharch said. It's too disgusting to enter Deer Terrace Pavilion from underwater. Is there no other way to enter? Zhou wanted to figure out the way to enter Deer Terrace Pavilion so that he didn't have to trade with the Dharch. To his surprise, the Dharch was very tight-lipped. She only replied, Don't worry. I'll let you enter Deer Terrace Pavilion easily this time. Zhou asked a few more questions, but the Dharch didn't say anything. She only said that he would know when the time came. Zhou was somewhat hesitant. He naturally wanted a companion beast that could defeat Primordial Sword Immortal, but he was somewhat unwilling to take the risk in Deer Terrace Pavilion in reality. The Dharch was just too mysterious. Zhou didn't wish to have too much contact with her. Forget it, I'm not going. Even without the Thearka's companion beast, I still have a chance of defeating Primordial Sword Immortal. Zhou had carefully studied the battle between Count of the Wind and Primordial Sword Immortal. Tyrant Behemoth still had a chance of defeating Primordial Sword Immortal, but the premise was that Primordial Sword Immortal's Wheel of Destiny couldn't kill Tyrant Behemoth. As he was pondering, he suddenly felt a fluctuation in the chaos space. Could it be that Explosive Fiend Man has completed its evolution? Zhou hurriedly checked the chaos space. He realized that Explosive Fiend Man hadn't completed its evolution. It was still in an egg state. That fluctuation was actually coming from the metal walnut. The little beast had been chewing on the metal walnut. After so long, it left a deep bite mark on the metal walnut. From the spot it had bitten through, the metal walnut seemed to have been bitten through. A crack as thick as a strand of hair had appeared, revealing a smear of white under the crack. As for the fluctuations Zhou felt, they came from the metal walnut. The fluctuations seemed to be at the level of consciousness. Zhou actually felt that it was seeking help from him. Could it be that there's a dimensional creature in this metal walnut? Zhouwen took the metal walnut out of the chaos space. The little beast relentlessly lay on the metal walnut and gnawed at it. It looked like it wouldn't stop until it ate through the metal walnut. Zhouwen used his hand to pull it, but its claws gripped the metal walnut tightly, refusing to let go. Zhouwen had no choice but to knock it unconscious. After the little beast fainted, its tiny claws refused to let go. Zhouwen had no choice but to allow it to grab the metal walnut as he reached out to touch the crack that had been bitten open by the little beast. A white substance was revealed from the crack. Zhouwen touched it and immediately felt his essence energy flow into the metal walnut. The feeling was similar to hatching a companion egg. The thing inside the metal walnut is actually a companion egg? Zhouwen was alarmed as he allowed the metal walnut to absorb his essence energy. Chapter 664. Crack. As the essence energy was absorbed, the metal walnut's outer shell split into two along the gap. A white ball-shaped object rolled out and transformed into a stream of light that shot towards Zhouwen's body, turning into a white dot-shaped tattoo. Summoning the companion beast, it was about the size of a rugby ball. He pinched it in his hand. It was soft and bouncy, similar to a bouncing ball. It might even be softer. With a casual pinch, the companion beast was pinched into all sorts of strange shape. Once he released his grip, it would return to its original state. This companion beast is quite fun. I wonder what use it has? Zhouwen was somewhat puzzled when he didn't receive any information about the companion beast. Typically, after contracting a companion beast, one would receive some vague information, such as the companion egg's name, level, etc. However, this one didn't have any of that. All Zhouwen could do was take out his phone to read its information. He thought to himself, such a special companion beast must have a very special ability, right? However, the amount of essence energy it absorbs is rather small. Its level shouldn't be high. After finding the white companion beast, he clicked open its information. Zhouwen was petrified when he saw it. Tai Sui, mortal stage, evolvable, strength, 11 speed, 11 constitution, 11 essence energy, 11 talent skill, Earth escape companion form, mimicry F***CK, this darn thing is Tai Sui. Zhouwen felt so regretful that his intestines turned green. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have been so despicable. He could have just let the little beast eat it. Thankfully, it's only at the mortal stage. It doesn't seem to have any life providences or skills like Jinx's master or misfortune. Zhouwen carefully read Tai Sui's introduction and realized that it wasn't as bad as he imagined. However, Tai Sui could actually evolve. This was basically a mythical companion beast's patent. If it evolved, he wondered if it would have abilities like Jinx's master or misfortune. I used to read on the internet that Tai Sui has a life providence like misfortune or misfortune. However, the photos of Tai Sui companion beasts taken online are a little different from this. Zhouwen searched for pictures online and compared them with the Tai Sui in front of him. Indeed, they were somewhat different. Those Tai Sui looked very ugly. Furthermore, they were black and yellow, unlike Zhouwen's. They were smooth and tender, looking like white jade. It's also possible that my Tai Sui is different from theirs. It doesn't carry bad luck, Zhouwen thought. Tai Sui was bouncing on the ground like a white bouncing ball that could jump on its own. It was fleshy and very interesting. Just as Zhouwen was looking at Tai Sui, the tiny beast woke up. It got up and saw the two halves of the metal walnut on the ground. It immediately rushed over. However, when it realized that there was nothing inside, it was immediately stunned. It turned its head and saw Tai Sui in front of Zhouwen. It immediately pounced over. Tai Sui seemed a little afraid of it as it immediately jumped behind Zhouwen. Zhouwen reached out to grab the fur on the beast's back and held it in front of him. The beast flailed its claws as though it wanted to fight Zhouwen to the death. However, its claws were just too short. No matter how hard it tried, it couldn't touch Zhou. Come, be good. This is for you to eat. If you don't eat it, what about this? Zhou took out some things to coax the tiny beast. Finally, when Zhou gave it an epic companion egg, the tiny beast angrily sprawled over and gnawed at the companion egg. As it gnawed, it glared at Zhou and Tai Sui as though it was indignant. Zhou fed some companion eggs to Tai Sui. Tai Sui didn't reject them, but its eating speed was very slow. Its body wrapped around the companion egg like liquid. It didn't seem to digest it, even after half a day. He then tried Tai Sui's earth escape ability and realized that it was really useful. As long as it touched the ground, it could instantly escape anywhere. However, as Tai Sui's level was still too low, it couldn't escape too far. As for its companion form, it was somewhat magical. It could simulate the companion form of other companion beasts. It could transform into armor, weapons, and so on. It could even simulate the appearance of companion beasts. However, it only simulated its appearance. Its essence didn't change, nor did it possess the abilities of other companion beasts. It looked like a rubber toy. Although Tai Sui doesn't have the legendary bad luck, it doesn't seem to be of much use. Seeing that Tai Sui was useless, Zhou let it slowly eat and evolve to see if it would be of any use in the future. Young Master One, are you on campus? And Xing called. Yes, Zhou answered. It's best you don't leave campus for the next few days, and Xing said. Did something happen? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. Recently, Dragon Gate Grotto has been a little abnormal. According to Chancellor Ling's judgment, there might be a large-scale breakout of Dragon Gate Grotto. When the time comes, we will do our best to prevent the breakout creatures from rushing into the city. As we don't know how many breakout creatures will appear, we might need your help just in case, and Xing said. All right, I'll be staying on campus for the next few days. After a pause, Zhou asked, does this mean that the other dimensional zones will also undergo large-scale breakouts? We are keeping a close watch. From the looks of it, we haven't discovered any similar situations. The situation in Dragon Gate Grotto has changed. It might be because something special is affecting them. And Xing said, according to Chancellor Ling, some of the breakout creatures outside have also come to Dragon Gate Grotto. It's unknown what's attracting them. When Zhou heard this, he immediately thought of the golden bird above Dragon Gate Grotto. Back then, it was Chancellor Ling who personally appeared to make the golden bird retreat. Not long after Zhou received the news, Dragon Gate Grotto was sealed off by the army. 2 days later, the school held a mobilization meeting. The students were also assigned some logistical work to assist the army in preventing a large-scale breakout. The atmosphere in the entire school became abnormally tense. Zhou, Li Xian, and company were assigned work. In such a critical period, no one could stay out of it. That night, a cow-like roar suddenly sounded from Dragon Gate Grotto. The sound was soul-stirring. The ground near Dragon Gate Grotto trembled, as though there was a slight earthquake. The roar lasted for an entire night, but nothing came out. However, this cast a shadow over everyone's hearts. This was because they were certain that something was really going to happen to Dragon Gate Grotto. Old Zhou, if all these dimensional zones are destroyed, do you think our Luoyang can still defend it? Li Xian asked Zhou as he moved the supplies. I'm afraid I can't defend it. Zhou knew very well that humans were much weaker than dimensional creatures. It looked like there were 100 mythical companion beasts on the list, but the mythical creatures in the dimensional zones were far more than that. There might be hundreds or even thousands of times more. Zhou even suspected that there were even more terrifying existences above the mythical stage. Otherwise, Torch Dragon wouldn't have the ability to evolve among its stats. Sogu. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.